is so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same. Never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same. Will never be the same ever again.
God's will is simple. The most wretched man in hell will not be Adolf Hitler. The most wretched man in hell, or woman, will not be one like Joe Stalin or some of these more modern devils. The most wretched person in hell will be a former Seventh-day Adventist.
Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A. Can you guys hear that music still playing in the background?
No, but I didn't like the reference to hell. You and I sent to hell there. Awfully so.
I'm glad that came through when I heard that the other day. My friend Adrian Anderson sent it to me. Oh, there's something going on here.
Oh, just talk so you can.
Well, I'll just say welcome everybody and just sit and relax and chat, and I'll try and fix the problem. It is on here somewhere.
Well, I can hear Peter, and Peter can hear Pete. Pete for the.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, that's okay. Not sure how to reverse that. Kindle. Okay, we're on reverse image. Okay.
So we are live, but we've just got a bit of a technical problem, which might just be my end.
I can hear Peter.
So you can hear me, but can you hear me twice, Grenville? Can you hear my voice starting again?
No.
Heard a squeak. Was that a cat?
Okay, it must just be my end.
The medication's working, Pete. I can't hear the voices. It's all good.
I can hear the voices.
My medication's caffeine. Been working. Really busy. Saving lives. As always.
How long does this go for?
Where do you work, Peter?
Hour and a half. In Melbourne, at one of the hospitals in the cardiac cath lab. Pacemaker.
Yeah. Wow.
And all that. Yes. Started at Sydney Adventist Hospitals where I started. And when you say Northern Beaches, know that we used to go to Mona Vale all the time. And that was a big trip. All the nurses would go after the shifts in summer. Even after night duty, we used to all pile in the cars and head on down.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? It's beautiful beaches around here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've just whacked a massive, great big hospital in the middle of the Northern Beaches too, which
really?
Which
I
is
knew
great.
Mona Vale Hospital was there years ago. Is that refurbished, replaced, or?
Yeah, there's a huge, big one. Northern Beaches. It's I forget how many $1 billion worth it is, but it's a beautiful facility.
Really? Ouch.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I didn't know that. Oh, good thing.
Yeah. So that'd be a pretty adrenal sort of job, cardiac cath lab.
Yep. Adrenaline if you're Americans. Epinephrine if you're Americans.
Epinephrine,
for a UK and Australian. So, yeah, going, the heart stopped. Oh, it's going too fast. Oh, that's all right. Most of the time we can fix that. Zap.
Yeah. Is it? So how do you slow it? You'd speed it with adrenaline.
Yeah, there are a number of things you can do. Adrenaline and adrenaline-like things to speed it up, but you can also use the pacemaker wires and electrically.
So right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got a delay there.
I'm back.
Okay. Sorry, I just had Grenville twice there. We had. Can you just we do some more mic tests before we have overlap?
I think it's going well now. I don't know what was happening there, Grenville, but I could hear voices in my head.
Seek help, Pete.
Yeah. So it was nice that you both were able to keep chatting. So welcome everybody to today's program. My guests are Grenville Kent and Peter Veitch, and I'm Peter Dixon, and we're going to be discussing, is there evidence for God? And Peter Veitch believes there isn't. Grenville believes
wait a minute, I did not say that.
Well, I'm just generalizing. But let me rephrase. Peter Veitch believes that there is not conclusive evidence to confirm the existence of a God. So we're going to begin, though, by just going back a little bit and discussing Grenville's book, because this is kind of a part two, where a week or two ago, Grenville, there we go. So Peter's...
How to reverse it back.
I'll just fix that. There we go.
Look at that.
So Peter's bought one. Hold yours up there too, Grenville, and we'll have a stereo book display. And so this came out recently, is doing very well on the Amazon charts. And hopefully you got a little spike in sales after our last interview, Grenville.
I made millions off that, Pete. It was great.
Yeah, I reckon, I should start getting a commission. And by the way, those that were enjoying the music that was playing at the intro, that is from my album Standing at the Cross, which I released over 20 years ago. And it's, I'm pleased that it's still being streamed, and people don't buy much online anymore. But if you'd like to stream that album on Spotify, there's the link for you guys if you're interested. And so sorry, I'm having all these little glitches this morning, but that's all right. This is live. We can roll with it. So last time we were working through some questions on the book, and Peter was writing and asking some good questions in the chat. And I said, look, Peter, why don't we see if Grenville's happy to come back? We're running out of time today, so we didn't get through all the questions. And we can continue asking the questions about the book. And then, Peter, as you have questions coming through, we'll hand it over to you as well to put in your thoughts. So I'll just continue on where we were up to. But first off, Grenville, just tell us a little bit about the book and what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, Pete, I've been interested in evidence for God, I guess, since I was about 19, because I walked away from my parents' Christian faith, thinking it was morally repressive and had little evidence to it. And interestingly, a bunch of people at university started giving scientific and philosophical evidence for God in lunchtime lectures. And I sort of toddled along, actually to mock and to poo-hoo, because I liked a good debate, still do. And blow me down, I found their comments very convincing and came to faith myself at 19. And ever since then, I think I've been interested, to know for myself, because I don't want to believe all this lovely stuff if it's just a bunch of Disney, fluff, but nothing against Disney, but I don't want to base my life on it. But and also for other people, because if this is true, if there really is an infinity of bliss on offer, you'd be doing someone a massive favor by telling them about it, wouldn't you? So I guess those two things have driven my interest. And specifically when my daughter went to uni a few years ago and started really questioning, as her old man had before her, I thought, right, I'll write this for her. So the book's dedicated to Zoe, my beautiful 26-year-old now daughter. But you know about beautiful daughters, Pete?
Yes, I've got my two daughters. I think one of them, my daughter Renee, I think is in the same year as your daughter as well.
My younger daughter, yeah.
Your younger daughter, yes. And Renee just turned 13. So, I took Ruby, younger even than Renee, to ACDC the other night.
I saw on Facebook,
Yes. And she had a ball. It was fun. It was a really good night. So yeah, it's great being a dad, isn't it? And
it is.
And Peter, your kids have all grown up now, haven't they? Peter Veitch.
Grandchildren.
What's that? Peter Veitch.
I think he said he has grandchildren.
Oh, grandchildren. 3 grandchildren. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to make it to that. You will, Grenville, but I might have to let that one go. I don't know. Who knows? My dad just turned 93, so that's a good sign. So let's go on to our next question that we had. Were there anything else you wanted to say, Grenville, that recapped some of the discussion we had last time, or will we just go straight on with the next?
Yeah, launch in, Pete, if you like.
And excuse me for being mildly distracted as I...
No, you're right. I was just going to say the book splits, just to remind people, the book splits into 2. The first, probably 2/3, looks at the idea of any God at all, the idea of a God, without getting too specific. And then the last third looks at the evidence for and against Jesus in particular. So I guess looking at the Judeo-Christian story, and that's sort of the structure of it. So I think we talked more last time about part 1 of that, didn't we? Just God
That's
in
right.
general.
Yeah, that's right. And we got up to chapter 6. One of the things I think that came across, and I'm interested in Peter's thoughts on this later, that you're not necessarily confirming the existence of the Western God, though that is the God you choose to follow. In some ways, where we got to, the existence of God could be open to interpretation. The truth claims that you draw upon could be used for Odin and other Thor and other gods as well. So I just wanted to say that you're not necessarily saying an existence can be confirmed for this Western God that we, hold as the real God. So in chapter 6, you claim morality is evidence of the existence of God. And I thought that was an interesting thing to state, because atheists also gather around the notion of morality and a collective idea and consensus on what that means. And the Christian, I guess, says, well, the consensus has already been done. It's in the Bible. So how is that different, the atheist viewing morality and believing there isn't a God, or there's not substantial evidence to convince them that there is one, and that you are claiming that morality is an evidence of the existence of God? Tell us why. I think we've lost. Here we go. So tell us why. It's bugs in the system today. I think we've got you back. No, we've lost you. We've lost you, Grenville. Hang on, let me just try one more thing this end. No, it says you're muted your end. Thanks for your patience, everyone that's watching. We don't normally have this many glitches. No.
Noise, I'm working.
Yeah, for some reason it's got the muted sign there, but it's not on my end. Let's just kick you out for a second, Grenville, and I'll chat to Peter while you just reconnect with that link. While we're just waiting there, Peter, I remember listening to Matt Dillahunty, and it still says it's muted there, Grenville.
No, I think Grenville can wave. I don't want to be saying things if I'm talking about him.
Yeah, can you hear Grenville? Can you hear Peter? Yeah, he can hear you.
Okay.
So we'll keep trying to work on the sound in the background. Yeah, I was listening to Matt Dillahunty a couple of years ago, that famous Texan atheist.
I've met him.
Yeah, I met him as well. Wow. And he was talking about that. Yeah, people do need to gather around a collective notion of what the morality is going to look like for atheists or agnostics. And Grenville is saying that for him, that evidence, the morality that people exhibit, is evidence of a God. What are your thoughts on that, where both are suggesting morality?
Yes,
yes,
exactly the same thing for all the other religions, Buddhism, Islam, etc., and then the evidence for their gods. So what that is not actually evident, not absolute evidence. It might be some evidence, subjective in nature, but because so many people with different religions and say they get their morals, like, for example, some versions of Islam allow you to have 4 wives, and that's totally immoral in most other religions. My wife's sitting behind me, so I'm not sure she can hear me. But So you could have another religion would say, yep, we've got these morals, therefore our God is right. So that's actually really solid evidence that people choose their own morality within a version of a religion.
Right.
Equally,
So,
say, yada, yada, we got our morals from Yahweh, we got our morals from Allah, our morals from Odin or whatever, therefore that God exists. So if you're going to use that for that argument, for one,
right.
you can then allow it for the other gods, then you get mutual contradiction. It doesn't mean that one is therefore right. It does mean that at least some must be wrong, possibly all could be wrong. Maybe some more than one could be right. Definitely evidence that at least some must be wrong. So, this choose your own morality. I'd turn that back on the God themselves. You choose a Yahweh that drowns people or that has a hell. Sorry, that was a really awful introduction, sending non-Adventists to hell. Hopefully.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's why I put it there, to remind people that that's a
I don't
disgusting
think
thing.
that progressive Christians would actually accept a hell, or the fiery burning one or the part-time one. And I'll just ask that to Grenville, and I'll shut up talking for a little while.
Yes, because I think what you were saying there is like a lot of pushback was given to Matt and others who said, well, we've got to decide what morality is, because they were saying we can go to the Bible. It's already been decided. However, what you just pointed out is that people can then go, well, even those believing in a spiritual realm can point to Odin or the Hindu gods, which also have claims of morality. So then you have to start going, well, which one is right? So Grenville, we'll bring you in there, and hopefully your mic's back on.
Yes, I think so.
Awesome.
Can I just check? And I'm so sorry that whatever technical happened there.
Hey, it's not your fault.
Check I understand. Oh, thanks. Check I understand your argument there, Peter. That are you basically saying we've got the best morality in our religion, therefore our religion's right? Is that sort of your version of the moral argument?
Peter D or Peter V?
Pete, well, let's call Peter V Peter, and can I call you Pete, as I have done for?
Yeah, that's
decades?
fine. Yeah,
okay.
Yes. That's what my mother calls me.
No, I'm not using that as an argument. I do see other people using it as an argument, and I would leave it to other people to make their claims. I don't make the argument that that's what they're saying. Yeah, if you state your argument, then I'd respond. I don't actually use that as argument at all.
Oh, okay. No, fair enough. I make sort of a skinny version of that argument where I go, number one, a real and objectively binding morality exists. Okay, so that's number one. So real objective morality exists.
Assertion. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's an assertion.
Yeah, it is. I assert that it is an assertion, and I'll back it up in a minute. Secondly, if God didn't exist, then real and binding objective morality wouldn't exist. And I'll go into that in more detail. And therefore, three, God exists. Now, this doesn't prove which God. It doesn't particularly prove my God. It's just an argument for theism generally. And so if we go back to those points, we can attack every one of them, and feel free to, back. As I'd say, go hard. If we're playing a tennis game of ideas, belt the ball back at me. I will.
Yeah, I'd like to see those three written. I'm not sure I can have a side panel with points written up on the screen or on the side panel, because you had those three, and sort of.
Got a chat? No, bang. Chat. Try the chat. See if that works. That just lets me see the chat. Private chat.
You could, can you write into chat?
I'm just trying to see if I can. But it's pretty easy. Number one, real and objective morality exists. Okay. Number one, real and objective morality exists. Number two, real and objective morality wouldn't exist if there wasn't a God. So therefore,
this is the premise, basic syllogism thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. It's a 3-point argument. Okay, so does real and objective morality exist? Let me state up front, I don't have the moral answer on everything. I don't claim to. I don't claim that I know all about stem cell research or war ethics or any of things. But I would say there's such a thing. If I could find one example of real objective morality, then that would be a good working case. And the one I've chosen in the book is one that it's a bit shocking, but it's one that I don't think anyone would disagree with, and that is that rape is always wrong. And I've challenged probably hundreds of audiences on that one. Is anyone ever going to get up and say, oh no, rape could be right? No, I've never had it, ever. Male, female, many cultures, no. No one says rape is ever right. Okay, cool. So let's say with that, we've found a piece of objective and real morality, that rape is always wrong. Okay, so where could we get that morality from? And the obvious place is nature, biology. But the problem is, when you look at biology, and you know, oftentimes evolutionists will try to draw ethics from nature. Cool, and you know, we're all going to evolve better if we look after each other in a species, and that's to an extent true. But the problem is that nature is just riddled with rape. I've read lots of research into this, and almost all animal species, higher and lower, engage in what they'd call forced copulation. Why? Because for a bloke, it gets him a better partner than he otherwise would. It gets him a genetic hitchhike on a more fit partner than he would normally be able to earn or deserve, and therefore it's attractive to men, to males in that species. And I have to say, the person who is the absolute survival of the fittest champion of all time, Genghis Khan, he's the father of a surprising number of people in Asia, 0.5% of the world's population. I mean, that's not, you know, that's a pretty high achievement for one guy, 0.5% of the world's population. How did he do it? By rape. So clearly there's an argument within nature for rape. And obviously I don't draw my morality from nature, lucky. And that's the whole point. You can't really get solid, objective, real morality from nature. Okay, so well, and that's just sort of a simple summary, but you're not going to get it from Darwinian ethics. Right, so maybe you're going to get it from society. Sure, yes, we do get some of our morality from society.
Okay.
But the question is, which society? No, go for it. Do you want to make a comment so far?
But the question is also then becomes which religion, because our religion also says don't rape. I would also say that. I'm not sure whether it's objective or not, but I totally agree that it's wrong. I think I'm not sure objective really changes anything. If you say by objective, Yahweh says don't do it, and various other gods in other religions allegedly say the same, and they get their moralities. So they're all objective, but they're all slightly different. One religion would have 14-year-olds are okay as wives, maybe in Texas or somewhere as well, sorry. Most Christian religions, I think, would say, you know, adults, whatever the adult age is, in we have it as 18 in Australia, and I'm not sure where else it is, but you're then using your objective religion, saying your God is saying it. You could exactly say the same thing for the other religions and the other gods. So they're as well.
Maybe you could. I'm not bringing that in. I'm not even talking about my religion. I'm just saying for all people, for all time, everywhere, rape is wrong.
And I'm it's definitional. It's defined as wrong. So I would agree, and that's, you know, possibly socially negotiated. But either way, subjective, objective, negotiated, I'm more than happy to say it's wrong. I just don't see how that supports a God. I mean, arguably, you know, Yahweh got carried away with Mary in the world of the story. There's, I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, well, let me explain it. If you're saying it's negotiated, let's go to Pakistan or to some parts of India, where rape is absolutely accepted as a punishment, not just for a woman, but for the brother of a woman. If a brother mucks up, the sister gets raped, and everybody thinks that's...
Yeah, honor rapes, honor killings, revolting.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's stories out of there, you know, well, I'm happy to get up and say that whole society, if that's what they believe, they're wrong. They're wrong, sure, irrespective of religion or culture. Yeah, okay, cool. So the point is, you can't get objective morality from societies, because one society might vote, you know, rape's fine. There are parts of Africa where rape is regarded as a cool thing for men to do. I'm not making this stuff up. I've read academic research into this kind of gear, and I cite it in the book. In parts of South Africa, 1 in 4 men have raped, 1 in 5 have gang raped. They say it's fun, it's what boys do. It's a good way to punish an annoying woman or keep her in a place. And they even believe it might heal them of AIDS. So my point is, some societies don't say it's wrong. Nature doesn't say it's wrong. I still say it's always 100% objective.
And so do I. 100% agree.
Great, love it. Okay, good. So we're on the same bus so far. Let's see how far we can share a taxi
Oh
ride.
God, not the bus thing. Now I'm sort of compelled to speak to that. Apologies for interrupting, because that was
Not at all.
really something that I did not enjoy hearing. So I'll just premise this with a Marcus Aurelius quote, live a good life. If there be gods, they won't care how devout you've been, and they won't hold it against you. And if there are no gods, live a good life, be kind to yourself, to others. Right. Now, whether there's a God or not, I would put that in. So I don't want people jumping off buses. This was really, I thought that was gaslighting. I don't think it was intentional, but somebody getting defenestrated off a moving bus if they don't believe in your particular God, I thought that can be seen as offensive gaslighting to people who don't believe that God. I'm not trying to be too, cruel and personal.
Sorry, come again. What are you talking about?
In your introduction, gaslighting, might as well jump off the bus if you don't believe in your God. That's in your introduction. And that just sort of flawed.
I've never said those words at all.
No,
Sorry.
I think Peter V,
Wow.
he was saying that, I'm glad we're on the same bus, in the sense that you and I agreed on a point then, which just is a euphemism for saying we agreed with each other for a moment. I hope we're still on the same bus as we continue on.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you were saying, Grenville.
The bus in your introduction, you were talking about.
I think that was a separate euphemism on the bus.
I'm not sure how we got to me throwing atheists out the bus for not believing in God.
No, you thought about yourself jumping off the bus there.
Anyway, should we get back to the moral question, or do you want to? You can thrash that out. I think I do say in my introduction that my faith stops. Let me read you the place. I think I say that for me, in dark times, it's a metaphor.
Yes,
I say it
in the
stops.
introduction, I've got it up here. The number 5 bus specifically.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite simply, of happiness in my faith from God, and yay for you and yay for other people. But it also say yay for other people, as long as they're good, for faith in different gods. If that's what stops them jumping off the bus, I would ask people to, stop listening right now, because I don't want anybody jumping off the bus.
Can I just
was really
where
awful.
on the great
Kept you
got the idea that I was suggesting
under the bus. I thought, I understand people can be sad and think if there's no God, they might as well jump under number 5 bus. So I just thought that
can I just suggest we get away from the bus analogy, only because I can see you're both talking about a separate discussion about the bus. Grenville raised the bus discussion in this conversation simply to say, we both agreed on a point, then that's great, we're on the same bus. And then you've gone back to the bus analogy he used in the book, which is actually a bit different. So we can come to that book analogy later on, but for now let's move forward where Grenville is just saying at that moment a little while back, so we're going to get off the bus. We're just saying that it was good that you both agreed on a point. So let's keep walking through the park, keep away from the buses, and maybe keep away from the RA topic. It's getting some potential YouTube algorithms crazy going along there. But anyway, let's reboot. You both agreed on a certain point there, and Grenville, if you just carry on.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So the third possible way we can get our morality from is from the individual. And if you want to move away from that topic, Pete, that's fine. Let's just think in general. I might be able to, a human being might be able to say, I make up my own morality. And there's a certain amount of truth to that. But there's also a risk there that if I am allowed to make up the rules for myself, I'll make them up in a self-serving way. I may not think about the poor or the weak or children or, anyone other than myself. And that's the problem with the individual being a source of objective morality. I don't know any individuals. I know some fantastic moral people, but I don't know anyone that, or myself included, that I would like to be the moral arbiter for the world. And so I guess I come to this. If there is such a thing as objective morality, and to change your example, Pete, by your request, let's say torturing fur seals for fun. Nobody's going to ever say that is good. I'm trying to think of horrible examples, right? Sorry, I'm not trying to be gory. or inappropriate. But just to give an extreme example that nobody would agree with, just to show there's an objective moral, you can't get it from nature, because there's quite a bit of cruelty in nature. You can't get it from society, because which society? 1930s Germany, perhaps? No thanks. You can't get it from the individual, because not many people are trustworthy. So if there is this thing called objective morality, where the heck did it come from? The only possible logical thing we've got left is that it came from a higher intelligence that made us. Now, I'm not saying that's the Judeo-Christian God or anyone. It just simply suggests the fact that morality exists suggests that somebody bigger than us, bigger than society, bigger than nature made it up.
Right. Okay.
So that's the basis.
No,
of the
that's
argument.
good. And let's pause it right there, because that's a nice clear statement. And thanks for going to the seals instead. I was just getting some feedback from YouTube there.
Understood. Yeah.
So, and Peter, your thoughts now, because I guess what Grenville is saying is that, look, there's morality exists on the planet with humans. It doesn't appear to come from anywhere amongst the earthly realm. So therefore, God. What are your thoughts, Peter Veitch?
I think they take it back one step further, that you, in a sense, choose your morality by choosing a God. You're making up your morality via packaging it in the made up gods, whether it's Yahweh, Odin, or whatever. So you're just taking it one step back. You actually are choosing your morality. You're just making up a God to then become the author of that. And, what God is saying, don't kill, etc. I mean, the Bible's an awful moral book. Where is the good things there in the Bible that seems to be so objective? I'm not sure whether objective's real or not, but I will agree on all the, don't kill, don't murder, don't rape things. But there's a whole pile of other things, worship this God or you go to hell. That's terrible. I think you're just taking it one step backwards. You're going to make up a God, and then that packages in whichever set of moral rules come from that God. So I would assert that people are making up gods, and they're choosing their morality, in a sense, by choosing their religion, their gods.
What are your thoughts, Grenville?
Yeah, I was interested in the comment that the Bible is an awful moral book. Look, we could do a whole couple of hours. We could do a whole 40-hour lecture series on that. My area of study is the Old Testament, and that's the part of the Bible people always go to try to prove how hideously immoral and violent and sexist the Bible. I just don't see it. I've studied it carefully. I've taught it for 15 years. I get that there's moral complexity.
Drowning everybody, the Noah's Ark, you're just taking that as a myth or reality. They go and slaughter the evil neighbors from the next door neighbor's tribe. Go and slaughter the Amalekites or whichever group they were. You think
the problem is, Peter, you've just chucked two examples at me real quick, and it would take me a good half hour.
Okay, do one. The Noah's Ark. Short version.
It'd give me a half hour. You'd need a good, sensible response to put it in context. It'd be like me saying, was it moral to drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima? To you. Quick, give me a 30-second answer to that. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just simply illustrating the fact.
Or maybe, no, you can't do a 30-second answer to that. You argue both ways. Personally, I would have thought, go and see that island over there. No, you don't. Right, stop your war, or we'll do that to your people or industrial things. So, yeah, that's okay. Good analogy, but limited. I see no context where drowning people is wrong. The entire world. Do you actually take that as a real thing? I'm not sure if I can pin you down to young Earth creationism, Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark. I'm not sure where you stand on that.
To be honest, we're probably in a bit of a footnote here, because this argument that I've just made, I don't know if you noticed, but it actually doesn't mention the Bible. It actually doesn't mention the God of the Old Testament at all. It just says there is objective morality. It can't come from nature or human or society or individuals. So it must come from someone good and supernatural. That's all I'm trying to prove. And so even if you could shred the entire Old Testament, you wouldn't even touch this argument, because it's not based on it. You know what I'm saying? So even if you're right and the Old Testament is a hideous moral book, then that doesn't touch this argument. because it goes.
Interesting. That'd be a great argument for throwing the Old Testament out by saying, let's do good things, assume a God is behind it. Then you would have to assume there's some good reasons for throwing out terrible things that are in your Old Testament.
I would love to sit down with you one day and discuss the terrible things. There are terrible things in the Old Testament, no question about that, but there's never terrible moral advice. I'll make that statement, and I'd love to be given time to back it up. There's nothing in the Old Testament that I find where God is not trying to push the ball forward, aside from, like, there's plenty of horrific stuff that happens, but always God is trying to advance the progress of good and human flourishing and well-being. And I've given a lot of thought to that statement.
The entire world is pushing things forwards. I can't see any way of fixing that. Like, if you do your Hiroshima argument, you got an all-powerful God. It actually could obliterate the other islands without killing a single person, rather than necessarily doing the Hiroshima thing or drowning them. So I don't think that stands up. I think your argument would fall for that.
And if
which one?
Putting Hiroshima.
I didn't make an argument. I just said it's a complicated moral historical question. You can't answer it in 30 seconds. I can't answer the flood or the Canaanite attacks in 30 seconds.
Canaanites, thanks for that. I lost the word. I rhymed with Malachi.
Right.
No, right.
Sorry, Pete. I think I butted you.
I was just going to say that if we're suggesting that there are moral actions manifested by humans on Earth, they're not good at coming together to formulate these ways of being moral, therefore it must come from a God above. To Peter's point, couldn't it be done a little bit more quickly, succinctly, instead of this apparent slow move forward from, over the last 3,000 years or so? Wouldn't that indicate more that it's coming from man and that morality is a little bit mixed up than coming from a clear source? And then and also then, which clear spiritual supernatural source do you choose?
Yeah, well, I think almost all supernatural sources are going to say, in broadest terms, love your neighbor. And so all religions are, well, with some exceptions, but most religions are going to give you that basic morality, love your neighbor. And so that's all I'm really trying to get to. I'm not even arguing for the Christian God here. I'm just simply saying this is an argument for theism of some kind. And we can disagree around the edge
your neighbor as well. So that's an argument for humanism.
Yeah, of course, exactly. Because in my view, humanists also are made in the image of God. They also have, moral insight. It's not the moral argument doesn't say only people who believe in God can see morality. Not at all. In fact, it would be the first to admit that believers often get it clashingly wrong, as the Bible says. If Christ for Christians is the best example of morality, the generosity, the kindness, the love of others, the altruism, the self-giving love is the absolute pinnacle of that. And again, I think humanists can understand that. They love it when they, on Anzac Day, celebrate the sacrifice people have made for other people against their own selfish interests. And they say, wow. So I think, I don't think Christians are the only ones to see it, or Jews at all.
So as for you, Grenville, as you've, with that question we asked about, that you're claiming morality is evidence of the existence of God. For you, as you thought that through, getting older, pondering these things, what, and you've said yourself that it could point to the existence of any supernatural being, not necessarily the Western God. Mm-hmm. What led you to go that way instead of to Shiva and some of the Hindu gods? What tests did you place upon those gods that confirmed that those paths were wrong and the Western God was right?
Great question, Pete. I think for me personally, and this is not a textbook absolute answer for everybody, but if you ask, since you asked me about me, I looked at those gods and looked at the concept of reincarnation. I think we briefly talked about this last time. Reincarnation is waiting for me to get my moral act together and climb the ladder to the point where I'm good enough to go up into nirvana. I'm never going to make it. I know myself, and everyone I know struggles with human selfishness, and that just doesn't. I just know that wouldn't work for me. Whereas the Christian gospel, the idea that God not only makes perfect laws, but then comes down and helps the poor idiots like me who break them and who do stupid things, and then and comes and gives grace. Well, that's going to work. That's going to work. And it seems to that since you asked my reasons, that's what did it. When it hit me that there's this God whose morals are as perfectly calibrated and fine-tuned as the laws of physics, and yet he still bothers with sinners who break them and loves us and comes and cops the consequences himself on a cross. To me, that just...
Can you list these perfect laws? Where do you specifically have these?
Where do you have which, sorry?
Specifically, you're talking about perfect moral laws. Where specifically would you refer?
I'd refer to probably, well, for a start, the 10 Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount. That's where I'd...
The 10 Commandments, the 4th and the 10th actually condone slavery. That's far from perfect. They're nowhere near perfect. Thou shalt not kill. Great start. How about thou shalt not bash people up, break bones, be mean to them in other ways. To say don't kill, great start. Nowhere near perfect. Goodness me.
I'm going to say, well, the way Jesus unpacks the 10 Commandments, for example, he takes the don't commit adultery one, and he makes it even to your wife. He takes it, he basically shows how broad and all-encompassing those simple principles are. And I'd absolutely argue, as Jewish scholarship has argued, as later writings in the Book of Moses have argued, as Jesus shows, that simple statement, don't kill, includes all the other stuff. Because he says, if I hate my brother and would like to punch his face in, well, then I've broken that commandment. I think Jesus comes, Peter, and paints those commandments as broadly as possible and shows how they apply a beautiful principle of kindness to all parts of love. As for
but other religions would say that, and I don't see how that's... If it's perfect, now you're changing from the Old Testament. So you're happy to say the Old Testament version isn't perfect and then move towards the New Testament one? Is that it becomes your perfect? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, thanks for asking. No, it's certainly not, because Jesus and the apostles used the Old Testament as the only Bible they had. They've got their principles from it. And so do I. Not as well as they did, but I do my best. And I think too, you mentioned the commandment condones slavery. I'd actually see it more that it's written in a time where there is slavery, and it knows it can't change that in the short term, but it says,
when you're saying rape, that we agreed on an objective, that's not even mentioned in the 10 Commandments. If you're going to
can I just finish the slavery point? It happens in a time of slavery, and so it tries to regulate that in a good direction. It deals with the rubbish that is in the culture, and I'd say it doesn't say there's rape, but it says don't commit adultery. That covers that. Don't commit. If you're faithful to one person in a marriage, you're not going to be going around raping people. I think that's all included. If you see, how the psalmist says, your law is very, very broad. That's what he says to God. Your law is very broad. I think he's giving us the point there.
Slavery was wrong. If you're going to be all that good, you could have made a point of saying, actually, don't have slaves.
Yeah, well, that's coming, isn't it? I mean, you've got to work with the culture that you have. And I think the Old Testament's working with a pretty primitive, nasty culture, but it's trying to push it in the right direction.
To argue for and against you, I'd also say there is a lot of slavery now, arguably even more slaves, for real slaves, sex slaves, trafficking, financial slaves. I'd argue it's still here. Again, not condoning it and saying it's really bad, call it out loud, often and always. But I think there's some place actually still got some pretty nasty cultures.
Absolutely, Peter. I mean, where were my shoes made? I hate to think, I think you're onto something there, big time. Yeah.
Let's go on to the next question that we were looking at from your book there, Grenville. Just hold it up again. We've had a lot of people join since the start.
God walks into a bar.
Yeah, God walks into a bar. Evidence for and against faith, which we'll come to that part as well. A lot of people. So we're looking at chapter 7, just in our list of questions here, and what I will just get you to do, because the nature of this Restream platform, if you both talk at the same time, it cuts both out. So just do a little hand thing, and then the other person will know I'll wrap up what I'm saying, and then you can speak. Just a technical thing. In a normal conversation, it wouldn't have actually affected it at all, but it's just the platform. So chapter 7, a lot of people would say that suffering, the pain experienced by people and even animals, shows there is no God. How do you respond to that?
Well, Peter might want to put that case even more strongly. I don't know if you resonate with that argument, Peter, if you want to have a crack at it.
Oh, no, that's great. I think you actually referred to Rose Fawn in your book, which would be one of the classic examples. And two nice things I really have to say about your book. You actually extended that a bit further than I had have thought before, and a couple of nice pieces of trivia in the book. But you actually did an extra little bit on Rose Fawn that I wasn't aware of. But yeah, no, the Rose Fawn that gets burned in the forest, that's a bad thing. So yeah, in terms of suffering, I'd also say unnecessary suffering, because you can say suffering, look, you need, your teeth, needs the anesthetic, that's going to hurt, but in the long run you will have a better set of teeth. A little bit of suffering might actually be required, so I'd reframe that as unnecessary suffering. And then I'd say Rose Fawn that gets does everybody know Rose Fawn? It's Derek Parfit started the thought experiment of the fawn that is in the forest that suffers, no humans see it. Was it really necessary suffering? That sort of thing. So
Yeah. William Rowe, the philosopher. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so does that argument convince you? Is that one of the planks in why? And I'm assuming, I think you call yourself an atheist, right? Is that one of the reasons why?
No, actually, it started with the evolution thing, and then all the rest sort of unraveled from there. And I think the Rose Fawn makes perfect sense within the context of life evolving over millions, billions of years, depending where you start from. I'm not saying it's a great thing. I'm saying actually death is a natural part of life, and unfortunately is a requirement. Something dies, something lives, circle of life and all that. I don't like it. I really hate the idea of seeing deer suffering, for example. So the unnecessary suffering, I think, is a great argument against an all-good, all-knowing, all-powerful God. I think it rules that out. It doesn't rule out a God that might say, not 100% good, could do better, let's have some bad things. So an indifferent God, it doesn't rule out a God that could do better. It does rule out an all-powerful one that would do all good all the time, that would not let deers burn in the forest. Pache, Bambi's mother. I know that was people who shot Bambi's mum. Spoiler alert.
I saw that film when I was 4. I think my Adventist mother took me to the cinema to watch that film. I think I've been... That it just explains everything. But, that Bambi illusion.
In the church out at in Perth, but it was okay to see the films if they were in the church hall. So it was all the Disney movies in the church hall. That was my introduction to the cinema.
It's funny, isn't it? You do your best as a parent. Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off there.
Oh, we should have done that.
Yeah. You try and work it out. But no, back to the suffering thing, Pete. Look, man, this is the argument that I hear the most from people saying, not just in their heads, how can there be a God, but also just in their hearts when they suffer, or perhaps even worse, when people that they love suffer. They just go, there's just this, you just feel this visceral disappointment and anger at God, where people go, how could you let my fantastic mum die young of a stroke, or whatever it is. First thing I try and do is just acknowledge that pain. I believe in a God who weeps with people like that and who hates seeing that stuff happen on his planet, and is very, very sympathetic. The last thing I'd want to do is come stomping in with answers and go, well, here's why. There's a good reason. No, it sucks. It's terrible. And so to acknowledge that, for sure, I would want to start there. Pete, you've got your finger
So
up.
going backwards, it's a bit off-putting going this way, and it's really the other way. If he hates it and can do something about it and then doesn't, then that would make it even worse than merely hating it. If you or I saw the child drowning in 2 inches of water, we would all save it. but your God is powerful, more powerful than us, and doesn't save it. That makes it even worse, I think.
Agreed. 100% agreed. If God's doing nothing about it, then he's equally culpable. I happen to think he is doing a lot about it, but that's another sort of topic. The first thing I would say is, if in suffering you get angry at God and throw God out the window, my question is, how does that help? How does that help? Because then you've got no hope. What do you say to a kid? And I've seen them, suffering in refugee camps in different countries, making aid documentaries and things like that. I've seen this stuff. What do you say? Excuse me. What do you say to that kid? You just say, "Oh, well, tough, mate. That's it for you." There's no afterlife. No one's going to catch you when you die. No one gives a stuff about you. The universe doesn't have any feelings because it's all just matter and particles and laws. I don't see how that helps.
Peter?
Right, yeah, in terms of comfort, I think that sort of can be one of the functions of religion. And for people that see if there's no hope, I would actually say, technically, alas, I think that's true. I wish it wasn't. I would actually see that as a form of gaslighting. But, this is such a difficult topic. Peter was saying maybe the algorithms might jump on us for something like this, because this is like, one of Albert Camus' core questions, which I don't really want to say out loud, but you're nodding there, so I'm sure you know exactly what we're talking about, the central question for Albert Camus. This is where it really gets awful. And that'd be coming back to bus number 5, which is something we don't really want to talk about, and I'll get clubbered with the algorithms. I think if people need comfort, probably they should stop asking questions, because I think that is a really, really central one, probably more so than the theodicy one. You can get around it by saying bad things are happening now, but yay, later on, live happily forever after. So now, what do you say to them? That is really tough. I think I think we both know the answer to that. If there's no God, yep, that becomes tough. I take the point. I just unfortunately don't think there is this happy afterlife. And people are going to cringe at this, and it is awful. And I've actually felt the same thing, like you were saying with your number 5 bus there. We move away from that.
Well, thanks for being honest about that. I mean, I think it's very saddening to think that that's it, or some awesome person like my grandma. What a woman, amazingly loving and talented and perceptive and intuitively, empathetic and all that, gets to 86 and dies. What a loss to the world. She knows so much. She's got so much depth. And if she's just gone, you can understand why so many cultures all around the world love the idea of afterlife, because I'd love to see her again. She was a horrible cook, but in every other way, because she was too busy reading, but she was just a fantastic person. And if we've lost her, that's mournful, that's depressing. But if God's got her ready to hit restart, and we'll have her back someday and I'll see her again, that would, you've got to say that's pretty attractive. Now, I take your point, Peter, that doesn't prove it's true. That doesn't prove it's true. But what it does do, and when you say stop asking questions, I just think that I could never do that. I would never encourage my kids to stop asking questions. It's such a human thing to be curious and to wonder. And the intellectual questioning that we do, I don't see that as a denial of faith. I think that's going to take you in the direction, I've found anyway, it takes me in the direction of faith. The more I dig into stuff, the more I know about stuff, the more it just points me towards and who of us wants to say to ourselves or to our kids, ultimately there's no purpose, have as much fun as you can, enjoy life as much as you can, and then you die, and that's it. Man, that's depressing.
So it is depressing, absolutely. I completely 100% take the point. Unfortunately, I do think it's actually true. Sounds like the invention of lying by Ricky Gervais, and going to tell people you're going to live happily forever after. Look, it sounds a bit like Disney. I wish it was true. I simply don't think it is true. And, to get down to these really central things, that is a really desperately difficult and depressing topic.
It's interesting, just to throw in a little personal thought here. As I've gotten older, when I left the church, and pretty much all of my faith lines and strands to any belief just kind of disappeared. And then I kind of thought I need some kind of a anchor, just because I'm literally feeling like I'm losing my identity. And so I drew a lot of solace from just the teachings of Jesus from the four Gospels. I just limited it right down, not the miracles, not the supernatural, just what teachings. Let's forget that Paul, may have influenced the four Gospels. Don't worry about that. Here's what we collectively as Greco, Judeo, Western Christians find some solace. And so that helped me a lot. But as I then explored some of these deeper thoughts that we're discussing today, I realized I don't have that fear ingredient of if there's nothing. I don't sit there and go, oh, how terrible. And that's been a very interesting thing, because I notice most people on both sides do. And it's just an interesting little tidbit of information. It means nothing.
Yeah.
But as I've approached and listened to and looked at these arguments, it's been interesting knowing that it doesn't matter to me. I find no solace in an idea of an afterlife. And I'm totally at peace with if there's nothing, cool, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd make a point of saying either that I think there probably is no afterlife, but I'd also make a point to believers that hopefully, as best I could see, if an all good God exists, no burning in hell would exist. You're talking about ISIS there. I think a lot of progressive Christians, I'd like to think that I'm not sure whether I'm going to pin you down or not. Probably I will. I think even part-time burning in hell is, just not a thing a good God would do. I think that's like ancient volcano gods, lake of fire, top of the mountain, that's a volcano, throw the goats in, keep Pele or
Ellen
happy,
Ellen White taught that those who had sinned more than others would burn longer in that final fire.
Yeah, I think burning part-time or for a longer time. Still, like
some would burn for weeks,
maybe
others were gone sooner.
It's only for a little while. You're talking about ISIS and some of the worst of humanity. Actually, also going back, Inquisition and burning people at the stake. Some Christians were in that as well. So
yeah.
It
gets
murky. God doing that. So I would always say to people, look, I don't think there's a God. Maybe there is. I hope so. But if there is an all good God, either way, hell isn't a thing. Don't worry about that. Just sort of move on. Sleep forever, or you'll go and chase kittens with Jesus or something. I would always make a point of one, leaving the door open to a good God, but I'd always make a point of saying, look, hell isn't real. I've talked to people who are on their deathbeds quite a lot. Anyway, I would always make a point, don't be scared. Hell isn't real. God or not, there isn't. Maybe there is a God, and I'd leave the door ajar for myself and for them as well. But I'd always make a point of, look, don't worry about hell. That's not a thing.
So I just want to say something here, because this is a really fascinating time and moment. I don't think any, and I'm not an Adventist, Peter Veitch isn't, Grenville is. This is SDAQ&A, but it's a former Adventist looking in from the outside. But it's an Adventist realm of discussion. I would challenge anyone to find any conversation like this on any Adventist-related platform. This is quite a monumental moment where this topic is being discussed. And so, we started with some technical issues. We were not sure about some of the euphemisms. We're starting to settle into a really good conversation here. And the chat as well have been going, whoa, what's going on? What is this, a roller coaster? I don't have anywhere to hang this hook on. So I'm just saying, persist, everyone, because I think it's these conversations that lead to a deeper connection with each other. Now, I'll come to you in a second, Peter. And with my thought there, I was so pleased that as I navigated these big topics for myself, the carrot or stick motivation of hell or heaven didn't motivate me, and I don't think many people feel that way. So it gave me an interesting kind of gentle ride through it, which I'm glad that my brain or my genes kind of made me that way. So yeah, it is.
That is interesting. So just in terms of suffering, right? Here's where it becomes important for me. If there's an eternity of joy available, if it's and you see a lot of tech gurus hearkening after this with technology, hoping that we'll augment the human lifespan and the body so we'll last 1,000 years and we'll still be, just as active as we were at 18, sort of thing. You read Yuval Noah Harari and Homo Deus and some of those books, right? And a lot of tech bros over in Silicon Valley are going, we're going to upgrade the human, we're going to fix all known diseases, we're going to fix mental illnesses, we're going to make everybody pronoid instead of paranoid. We're going to, and it's basically just Christian heaven minus Jesus plus computers. And I look at that, and there's a lot of attractiveness to people in that, because I think in answer to Queen's song, Who Wants to Live Forever, I think most people do. And I just say, if there's an eternal quantum of bliss available out there, who the heck wouldn't want it? Who the heck wouldn't want it? And it would be relevant to the topic of suffering, because if you've suffered in this life, and we all have, through our own choices or other people's or bad luck or whatever, what if there's just this huge amount of joy on tap? And Paul makes this point in Romans. He goes, the little bit of suffering we've done in this life is nothing compared to the weight of the joy and the glory that is in out there for any person who grabs it. And I think that's a very attractive and a very relevant to the topic of suffering.
Okay, back to you, Peter.
Yeah, on suffering, if you've got this eternal happiness and joy, then yay. But in terms, you cannot, even if you live for billions, millions, zillions forever, one cannot be unraped, untortured. You're going to be in heaven. Are you going to remember all the bad things that have happened? Surely that's going to be a bad memory. Somebody's got forgiven, and Jeffrey Dahmer goes up to heaven because he now accepts his particular version of God, whereas Carl Sagan doesn't. Jeffrey Dahmer's sitting next to you, and he's the one who's ate your previous version of yourself. That's going to help you be joyful.
Well, I would be joyful that someone so toxic and disgusting and damaged had actually gotten their act together. I think any good person would say that there's hope for the worst person on the planet. You'd like them to turn. You'd like them to realize and grow and get better. I think that would be a win.
And if they never turned, if Jeffrey Dahmer, say, didn't go and turn on his deathbed, recant, and he's been like awful for 99.999 almost recurring % of his life. Okay, I'm happy for people to turn and be good, but somebody's bad, they're up in heaven, and somebody who has never turned and been good, or has turned and been good, has then done rape, tortured, murdered them. You're going to remember that, or is that going to be blotted out and you're not going to remember what happened in the past? Because surely that would hurt, and then hurt forever.
Well,
it sounds like
sounds like you'll be dumbed down to just, we'll be all these drones that just feel joy and happiness.
It sounds like you want Jeffrey Dahmer to be punished. Are you wanting a bit of hell for some people?
No, I don't want hell. I would have them punished, as in sent to jail in the case of Dahmer, for the duration of his life for having murdered lots of people. So not going to burn them at the stake. So depending what you mean by hell, if you think jail is a version of a hell, I'd accept that. But to torture somebody, no. But actually, can I play with an idea? This might be a fun little tangent. Tell me if I'm going off the planet completely. The Star Trek transporter accident hypothesis. So you go from the Star Trek transport at the other end. Are they different molecules? Is that you? I then put that into if somebody's going to go to heaven, your corpse has degraded, you've been burnt on a pyre in India, or cremated in Australia, or in a hole in the ground in Kurrambong or something. Is what's going to happen? Is that a copy, or would that be your real self? This is just hopefully sort of lighthearted. Is that you? Is it a copy of you? Are they putting the different atoms together? Is that actually you?
It's a good little side tangent, especially for those.
It's a great question.
Star Trek.
If you're a materialist, then you change at least every 7 years. Every cell in your body is renewed every 7 years. But if you believe in something spiritual, if you believe there's a non-physical core or soul or spirit or breath or life force to a person, that wouldn't change. And I think that's your answer. If you believe in some form of dualism, that there is more than just a physical world.
Yeah, but you're doing like a ship of thesis there, where you've replaced the plank or the cells and continuity over time. The ship's been sailing around in the case of ship of thesis, or in the case of us walking, as long as we still walk. Where there's a continuity over time. Are we the same person? In bits and pieces replaced, we've got artificial arm, or we've got cells replaced, or the ship of thesis got the planks replaced. Continuity over time. But then if you're going to heaven, there's actually a break in the continuity. You've all your cells have been fried in the cremation oven. They're going to go and pick the same atoms or different ones. You've got a whole new set of atoms. Is that a copy of you? And if so, which part of you? You as a 20-year-old, you as the 90-year-old dying of some dreadful diseases. You just, it's a bit of a tangent. Is that a copy?
Well, if you still have soul, that's still you.
This soul,
that's still you. It doesn't matter.
I'm not sure there is such a thing as a soul. Where does the soul live? If there was one.
We clashed that. Sorry, just finish that thought.
Sorry. We should.
Oh, wait, go ahead.
Sorry, apologies for speaking over, my fault. I'm not sure there is a soul. I would buy sort of basic Adventist belief, I think, that would sort of become a soul. We are a soul. I'd accept that, but I don't think there's anything ethereal floating around, ghosts or something like that. So I'm not quite sure about that.
Is there a non-physical part to a person?
I don't think so. Is that what you're saying when you mean soul?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I think the Adventist one is, yada, yada, become a soul. And I'm not sure soul leaves the body in Adventist theology. Maybe it does.
What do you think? Do you think there is a physical soul?
Soul exists. I don't think that's a thing. Except
so there's
for
no non-physical
soul. I'm okay with that. But something that's non-physical, non-corporeal, I don't think that's a thing.
Okay, so you don't believe there's any non-physical part to a person?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence for that, but that's another chapter. Just to get back to the suffering thing, I don't know, Pete, if you want to go down that track, but the classic problem of evil, and this will be familiar to people, if our audience is sort of freaking out and going, where the heck are we going? Here's an old one that you've heard before. The logical problem of evil says an all-knowing God would know about suffering, an all-loving God would care about suffering, an all-powerful God would be able to prevent and fix suffering, and yet there is suffering, so there can't be a God who is all those three things. As Peter said before, there might be a God who's two of them, maybe, and that's an old argument. I think it's a very good one, except along came an American or Dutch American philosopher called Alvin Plantinga, who went, hang on a second, there could be an all-knowing, all-good, all-powerful God who decides to make humans free. Okay, and why would he make humans free? Well, because without freedom, there's no love, there's no creativity, there's no individuality. And those are the best things about being a human. I mean, there's no music, there's no art, there's no romance. You lose a lot of things if you lose freedom. The problem, though, with freedom is that it would be illogical and impossible for an all-powerful God to control what free beings do. It would be impossible for an all-powerful God. And so that's the reason, if freedom is of value and God makes people free, well, then that explains a lot of the suffering that goes on this planet just by human choice. There are other aspects to it, but that's the main one. And I've asked a bazillion people, right? If you could live in world A, where you can do whatever you want, in world A, you can't hurt anyone, no one can ever hurt you, but you're not free. Or world B, where you are free to do whatever you choose, pretty much, but people do get hurt by my choices. I do dumb things to myself or to others, or they do it to me or whatever. Which world would you live in? I've never had one person say they'd rather live in world A. And I think that provides a good reason for God to allow some limited suffering as a way of keeping freedom.
No. Can I? All right. As a responsible adult, you would not give your children the freedom to play with live grenades. It is quite possible to have your children in an environment where the only food available to them, you can have a wide choice of food, is stuff that is not lethal, that's not going to kill them. Your children can play anywhere, go anywhere, do anything. That does not entail giving them live grenades. So a responsible parent, ergo a responsible God, could create something where you don't actually have the choice to kill and murder people. Gravity's turned down so the rocks won't hit you on the head. So, you know, you by giving free will to children to give them live grenades, you can ban grenades from existing if you're an actually all good, all loving God. I don't think you need to then have the freedom to go and, you know, stab people with knives or grenades. No, a responsible adult can have a safe environment and you can have all this freedom of choice, just not the freedom to pull the pin on the grenade and, you know, hurt yourself and other people. So I don't think that actually counts. Yeah, you can get
All right,
people.
let me take your logic a bit further, Pete. What are you going to ban? Are you going to ban guns?
In a ideal, hypothetical, perfect world.
Okay,
yeah.
let's go with this scenario where God bans all the dangerous stuff.
Give it back to you. 2 seconds. Yeah, God could turn the bullets into flowers in mid-air so it doesn't kill people, even if you allow it. So an all-powerful God could do that.
He could. And are you going to ban drugs? They've killed a lot of people over the years.
Yeah, but in a perfect world, you wouldn't need drugs. You'd have them off the shelves to not do something.
You're going to ban them?
Eden-like perfect world, drugs wouldn't be a thing.
Okay. Are you going to ban fatty foods, junk foods, because they do a lot of damage to us?
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is the real world there, where you know we go.
But you see what I'm asking you, don't you?
Huh?
You see what I'm asking you? What are you going to ban? If God's going to ban some things, then he hasn't really given us freedom at all, has he? See, I can't buy this half-free scenario that you're suggesting there, because if God makes us sort of free as long as we don't hurt anybody, well, then we're not free. Because I could hurt you with gossip. You could hurt me with insult.
Okay,
I could hurt you with...
hurt people.
Can I just finish that thought? Can I just finish that thought?
Sorry.
Can I just finish that thought? I could hurt you with gossip or accusation or criticism. You could hurt me with verbal stuff. Is God going to make us unable to say those words? You know what I mean? If he's got this controlled environment, we're not free at all. We're stuck in a rat cage, you know, in control.
Will heaven be like that, where we lose all desire to gossip and pull the pin on hand grenades? Not that
I think we'll lose all desire. We won't want to. Yeah.
I think by giving.
So isn't that therefore the kind of world you're talking about, where we have no more freedom of choice? Will heaven be no freedom of choice?
Well, there's an old saying, isn't there? Love God and do what you like. And I reckon that's what we'll do in heaven. We'll love God and we'll do whatever we like, but it won't be anything.
Freedom back onto itself, where you are free to then have your grenade or knife onto somebody, but that's actually taking away the other person's freedom to not be stabbed by the knife, to not be blown up by a grenade. So some sets of freedom are taking away another person's set of freedom. So I would have a world where, let's take away the freedom to then kill people, which is taking away their freedom to not want to be killed. Golden rule, if you will. So, that argument is problematic. You're free to do bad things, which then actually in and of itself takes away the other person's freedom to not be stabbed, shot, etc.
Yeah, which is one of the worst things you can do to a person. Restrict their liberty, restrict their freedom of choice, restrict their sexual choices, restrict their choices to choose their own identity and then bag them for it. I mean, that's terrible. But you see, as soon as God puts restrictions around, I'll make you partly free, you're not free at all. I'd argue. As soon as you have things that it's impossible for you to do, you're not free at all. And so you either make humans free or you don't. And if you do, there's risk.
A universe so good that the freedom to hurt or be hurt could be taken away. And I don't see that as a minus. I think, if you're going to have your perfect heavenly type of environment, that would actually take away the freedom to hurt and murder. And I think that would be a great thing.
Now we're going to move on from there. Some good thoughts coming through. And as I said earlier, if you're just joining us, this is a discussion where we're looking at the evidence of God. Which God? We've been discussing all those things. And I'm realizing that I don't think any kind of Adventist forum has had this kind of conversation. Grenville, you've done a lot of work talking with atheists and with an eye on the God perspective. So you've interviewed, I think, from memory, some pretty key people. But I'm talking about as lay people in the Adventist Church, and that's why there is a sense of we're just finding our feet, and we are. I can feel it just settling into a nice groove, and I want to thank the audience for being patient, because it's new territory here, and part of the notion of SDAQ&A is people are welcome to be sharing their ideas, vaxxer, non-vaxxer, atheist, Christian, former Adventist, current Adventist. And as Peter pointed out, when I played that little clip at the start where that famous Adventist preacher is saying, God has a place in hell that, not that for people that are worse than Hitler and Stalin, and they are the former Adventists. So I'm trying to create a space that's opposite to that, where we actually get to, former Adventists, current Adventists, we get to just have interesting conversations.
Yeah.
Now,
I'd be like a universalist. Sorry, I'm interjecting. A universalist where I think either we might all be saved, maybe. I just think universally, we're all going to go to the same place, which is eventually nowhere. But I really want to do away with that hell. But the point about the non-SDAs being the worst, Islam does a similar thing. If you talk to some of the Wahhabi Sunni version of Islam, the very worst thing isn't atheists or Christians. Sorry, I'm looking at you, Grenville. That's not a disparaging thing. The worst thing is not atheists or Christians or Jews or other religions. The very, very worst thing is an apostate Muslim in their.
Yes.
Sometimes I say Christians, atheists. Sorry, Christians, Muslims, and Jews are all sort of, in a larger sense, people of the book, and they sort of happy to do that. But the apostate Muslim is the very, very worst thing. They would hate those more than, well, all three of us.
Yes. Yeah.
Pete, before we leave suffering, can I chuck a C.S. Lewis quote at you that actually turns it as an evidence for God? Can I just quickly read you a C.S. Lewis? I'm a huge fan of the guy.
Just while you're finding that, I just want to reply to Motor Sapien, who has said, no, this kind of conversation has been had before. Maxwell used to do it. I don't think he did it, though, Motor Sapien, in a conversational public setting. I don't think he had other guests. I'm talking about the flow of chat, me, Peter, Grenville, this complex discussion. I don't think in Adventist forums it's ever really happened much before. Back to you, Grenville.
Yeah, I was going to say, so C.S. Lewis loses his mum when he's 9. He goes off to World War I, and one of his mates is blown up in his arms, and he comes back really pessimistic and an atheist, and he goes, stuff this. World War I. That made atheists of so many people across Europe. But then he starts to rethink it, and he says this: my argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? If the whole show was bad and senseless from A to Z, so to speak, why did I, who was supposed to be part of the show, find myself in such violent reaction against it? Of course, I could have given up my idea of justice by saying it was nothing but a private idea of my own. But if I did that, then my argument against God collapsed too. For the argument depended on saying that the world was really unjust, not simply that it didn't happen to please my fancies. Thus, in the very act of trying to prove that God did not exist, in other words, that the whole of reality was senseless, I found I was forced to assume that one part of reality, namely my idea of justice, was full of sense. Consequently, atheism turns out to be too simple. If the whole universe has no meaning, we would never have found out that it has no meaning. Just as if there were no light in the universe and therefore no creatures with eyes, we would never know it was dark. And dark would be a word without meaning. So you can see what he's saying there. He's sort of going, well, the very fact that I can see something's wrong proves to me that I believe in justice and right. And so that can't arise if there's no God. And so he sort of flips the whole idea of suffering to say it's actually an evidence that there is a right and wrong and that there is a God behind it. So I find that argument very interesting and quite convincing, actually.
And humanists
And
do the same thing, that, let's be really good to people. I don't think that necessarily needs a God. I think Lewis was actually a terrible philosopher and a terrible theologian and not a very good apologist. I really don't buy that. I do buy the how do we know something is good or bad as could be used as an argument, but I do see it as circular. I don't think it proves anything.
How do you see it as circular?
Lewis saying that here we know right from wrong, therefore as a God. I think, where does that come into it?
How is that circular, though? Just help me understand what you mean there, if you can.
Circular by saying we know right from wrong, therefore God. We can all agree that the right.
Sorry, I'm trying to understand you, not argue with you, but where's the circle there?
The circle from saying that if we know right and wrong, that is a good argument for a God. I don't see that as.
Okay, but how does that then go back to right and wrong? Yeah. Anyway, whatever. You haven't closed the circle there for me. Maybe.
I was trying to dig up your exact quote on Lewis. I've got mine here and I can search for it, but I only got Lewis with about 20 different references in your book. So I sort of missed the actual precise one. So I'm probably a little bit lost on that.
That's all good. You can get similar arguments from atheists. I mean, you've got good old J.L. Mackie, the guy who pioneered the suffering argument. And he says, if they're objective values, they make the existence of a God more probable than it would have been without them. Thus, we have a defensible argument from morality to the existence of God. I can find you about 5 top atheists who say that. If there's such a thing as right and wrong, that's a pretty good supporting view for there being a God. This is atheists talking. And so when Lewis stumbles over suffering as an example of right and wrong, I think it's quite a logical next step then to turn around and say, well, that's a clue. It isn't senseless. There is some sense to it. It's not just random atoms in the void buzzing around. And for him, that's an argument for theism. Probably not everybody will see it, but certainly I think, I certainly find it convincing.
Now we're going to go back.
The argument to say the problem, instead of the problem of evil, you could use Stephen Law's the problem of good. And because there is good in the world, how do you explain an evil God? So you could actually invert that and have the problem of good if you're trying to explain an evil God. So
who explains an evil God? Who wants an evil God?
No, you can want or not want. Just saying, as a logical point, you could invert the argument for the problem of evil. You could also invert it and say the problem of good, to use that as an argument for or against an evil God, for example. So how can there be an evil God when there is good in the world?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Do you see a problem with that? The evidence of good and love and kindness and whatever in the world, sure, and design and beauty,
which then equally supports the existence of an evil God, or at least an indifferent or something.
But, yeah, it is evidence against an indifferent and an evil God, and great. That kicks the ball forward for me. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, good. So we get into that Hegelian dialectic of thesis and antithesis. Did I say that right? And then synthesis, and keep moving it around and around. Because I'd probably just say, pick something and I'll say the opposite and then see what happens. But I'm more than happy to say exactly what I think as we go along. So I think we're actually having a little bit too much agreement here. I'm not sure we're entertaining enough.
We're going to go back to the book. Grenville, can you hold it up again for us? This is Grenville's latest book, can be found on Amazon.
Happy to plug the book.
And I think it's Amazon Kindle as well as a physical book, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got the
Correct.
Kindle version here.
So yeah, it's a good read. I bought the Kindle version actually, so I didn't even need to ask that. Okay, we're going to chapter 8. That's the war story there about Pearl Harbor. And I'll get you to sort of sum that up for us, but try and include some thoughts on does personal experience validate the existence of God? People like Buddhists, Hindus, they will say personal experiences validate their belief in God. What are your thoughts, starting with Grenville?
No question. Personal experience of the divine under whatever brand name. I think there's a lot more in common between religions in that regard than there is opposing. The chapter you're talking about, I was blown away, Pete. I discovered a few years ago that the lead pilot in the Pearl Harbor raid went through a major process of he was a real militarist. He believed in the sort of the Bushido code of the samurai, and it was all about smite your enemy, fight, and all that. Then he loses in World War II. Incredible life. He's there at the Battle of Midway. I don't know if you guys know the history, but it's a great movie on it. Battle of Midway, decisive war battle in the Pacific War, and he's there and he watches three Japanese cruisers get sunk. Most of the pilots he's led in the raid get shot down, and all his friends die. He happened to have an appendix operation that day, so he couldn't fly. So he survives. He goes back to Japan. Japan loses the war. He's in Hiroshima the night before the bomb goes off, but he gets called away to a meeting, and then he comes back the next day to inspect it and still survives. Mm. And he gets to the point where he's going, hang on, my whole philosophy of hatred has been wrong. And he sees this little girl dying the day after Hiroshima. And she says to her brother as she's dying, brother, get revenge. And this pilot, Mitsuo Fuchida, he goes, hang on. My whole worldview is based on violence, domination, and revenge. And that kid just showed me how wrong it is. So he goes looking for a new worldview. And meanwhile, there's an American boy who's been in one of the bombers that bombed Tokyo at the beginning, early in the war. And he's been in Japanese prison for the last 3 years. He's come in secular, but he's discovered a Bible in there, and he's come to faith in those terrible, terrible times. And he feels a real sense of forgiveness for the Japanese. And he publishes his story. And the Pearl Harbor pilot, the Japanese Pearl Harbor pilot, reads it and goes, whoa, this guy's found something in the words of Jesus. When he says, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, that just blows him away. And both of those pilots who've been through war hear the words of Jesus, getting tortured by soldiers, and they go, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Man, oh man, that's impressive. And they're incredibly blown away by that. Then there's a third quick story that mixes in. There's a young American girl whose parents have been missionaries in the Philippines, and Japan as well, and they've been killed by the Japanese, tortured and killed, beheaded. And she's back in America. She hears about it, and she's so filled with hatred that she just about gives up on her faith. But then she goes, hang on, no, I've got to love my enemies. I've got to love my enemies. So she goes down to the local prisoner of war camp in America and starts acting as a kind nurse and social worker to those men. And they can't believe it. And they're like, what the hell are you doing? You should be hating us. And she's going, no, my religion says I have to love you. And the more she does for them, the more she starts to like them and understand them. And she can't believe it. But eventually she feels a real kindness towards them. And they all go back to Japan eventually. And they say to the Pearl Harbor pilot, there's this girl who did all this kindness to us. Why the heck would she do that? And he's blown away by what this girl did. And he goes, if that's Christianity, that's what I need. And so he goes after it. And to cut a long story short, the lead pilot of Pearl Harbor and an American airman who's bombed Tokyo become best of buddies. They go around Japan together, teaching a message of forgiveness and grace. And they massively changed hundreds of people's lives in that hateful post-war environment. I haven't told that story very well. There's so much more detail in it. But the bottom line is, if people who had no experience of God can have these experiences, then what does that say to us? It seems to suggest, I would argue, that, look, if you're not drugged, if you're not seriously mentally ill, if you're not kidding yourself, if you're not in it for other reasons, if you've had an experience like that, well then, my goodness, that should be some evidence for the existence of God. And if someone else says they've had an experience like that, and you trust them, they're not lying, they don't have a motive to deceive, they're not making money out of it or whatever, then maybe that's evidence as well. So in quick summary, that's the argument from human experience. And there's a counter argument that says, well, I never experienced God, why didn't he bother to reveal himself to me? One of my favorite uncles, he used to say that to me all the time. Why didn't God ever reveal himself to me? And that's the counter to it. But I think the fact that people would say they've had spiritual experiences that have massively changed them for the good, that's the argument from experience. Go, Peter.
Thanks. Unmuted. Look, if people have experience leading to do good things, then yay. But I think the argument from experience works against itself. If you have an experience of, the Buddha has told me to be kind to people, therefore that version is right. Hello, I won't say Vishnu because he's a very nasty god. Pick up another god, so be it 10,000 different religions with 10,000 different versions that have led them to be good, is an argument for, actually, let's help people be better, and if it helps them, then yay. But when you have mutually contradictory personal experiences, I've experienced the great eagle, hypothetically, that has led me to have a happy life and to be good to other people. Therefore, the great eagle spirit is the one true eagle, one true God. So personal experience, have mutually exclusive ones that rule each other out. So I think that actually works against it. My experience hypothetically would be this God or this non-theistic ideology may lead me to be a better person. Therefore, that ideology or God is right. So when you have to believe me because Yahweh told me this, and I'm now going to be helpful and live a happy, good life, but it could equally apply to 10,000 or hypothetically an infinite number of other gods and other religions. So I actually think that is evidence that it is people experiencing things, people thinking things, and people making gods up. Look, we have exactly the same thing. I've lived in Saudi Arabia for 7 years. We have come to Islam. I know there's pretty versions of it, and then become a better person. Therefore, their version of a God is right. That does not follow. In fact, when you have mutually exclusive ones, at least one must be wrong.
Okay, yeah. You want to emphasize the differences between different religions, and I'd expect there to be differences, cultural differences, personal differences. People are going to call God different names. People are going to have different superficial views about morality and what that God is and so on. But ultimately, I think there's a lot more in common than there is apart between religions. They're all saying, worship this higher being who loves you. They're all saying, be good to your neighbor. And if they call things different names, I don't have a problem with that. Any more than I have a problem, I drive a Toyota, Pete drives a Rolls Royce because he's a rock star. We both agree on cars. And you're not going to say, Peter's Rolls Royce cancels out my Toyota. No, we both drive cars. We both see the benefit and the fun in driving. And I'd say that about religions too. If somebody's a Baptist or a Baha'i or a Buddhist, I think some religions have more truth in them than others, but I think they can all have an idea of love and of grace and of wanting to love my neighbor. And I'd want to say, although in this story, a Buddhist becomes a follower of Jesus, and a I guess secular Westerner, whatever that means, becomes a follower of Jesus, and there's a lot of commonality in that discovery. So I'm not sure that there are many religions argument cuts against the existence of God per se.
Grenville, just for a fun little mental gymnastics, tell me a God that you don't believe in.
Sure, Allah.
So what standards of proof did you use to determine that Allah doesn't exist?
Well, it depends. I mean, Allah is just the Arabic word for God. And it depends which Allah we're talking about. There's probably many constructs of what Allah is.
The one you don't believe in.
The one I don't believe in is the one that holds people forever in an eternal hell under his throne, so that the fire is so hot that they cry liquid copper, because that would be a relief to them. A God that would torture people forever and ever and ever. I don't believe in that God. Why? On moral grounds. But I'd still be the first to say that for some Muslims, their faith motivates them to do good things. And that I probably have more in common with them in referencing a higher power. We can disagree about the rules, that God, but I still would want to emphasize the common ground I have with that person, because it's there.
So that the statement that if you do that Allah that you don't believe in says I'll fill your throats with copper, what's the standard of proof there that you used, not just the action of that God?
Well, I think many elements that apply to theism generally can support Islamic faith, right? In fact, some of them were invented by Muslims. The cosmological argument, for example, was very much developed by medieval Muslims. I think there's a lot in common between those religions in their purest form. The standard of proof, I think the standard of proof of theism is the arguments I've sketched, the evidence for and against.
So the proof that you used, the standard of proof you used that convinced you that that particular Allah did not exist. What was the standard of proof that you used?
I don't know what you mean by standard of proof. I guess balance of probabilities, if that's what you're asking. Is that the sense in which you're asking, Pete?
No, not so much probabilities, but you would have, just knowing you would have spent time not just trying to confirm a belief in your Western God and gone for how I believe in him because of this, this, and this. Sure. There's also the reverse. I don't believe in this God because of this, this, and this. What were the this, and this standards that you used to prove to yourself that that God didn't exist? The plausibility possibility is a whole other argument, so I'm not referring to that.
Shoot me if I'm not getting what you're asking me here. I guess I see theism generally as having a lot in common. All sorts of theists.
Yes, that's what I've been getting the drift of.
And those, the first 2/3 of my book would apply pretty much to almost any religious person, almost any God. And I want to emphasize how much in common that is. Where it gets different is when we start talking about Jesus and how he is. But at first, I'm just really trying to say there is somebody out there. A Muslim's going to say Allah created the world. I'm going to say Yahweh did it. You know, but ultimately we're calling them different names. We believe in something somewhat similar. To try to answer your question, if I get it, where I part company with some... Go. No. Where I part company with some forms of Islam is when they go out there and say God's going to cook people forever. But I part company with some Christians on that point as well. And yet I still believe in the Christian God. Do you know what I mean? So it's some of the add-ons that people put onto God where I go, no, that's not it.
Well, where I guess where I'm going is where I find your argument interesting, that I've heard perhaps less elsewhere, is a lot of people like Ricky Gervais will say, well, just believe in the one God you don't believe in. And I've just taken it one step further, you know. And so they will use standards of proof to convince themselves that that God doesn't exist. Shiva, Allah, whatever they decide, Thor, Odin. And so someone defending the Western God, you'd normally say, okay, well, the standards of proof that have convinced you these other gods don't believe in, have you applied those standards to the God you do believe in? Whereas you've got a bit of a twist in your book where you're you're not even really laying a claim to denying the existence of those other gods. You're creating a realm that there's something supernatural going on. I choose to believe in the Western God. And I just find that quite interesting, because the usual questions you could ask someone that is a theist will tell me what standards you used to prove that Shiva doesn't exist. And they'll say this, this, and this. And then you say, well, apply those to your God. And they'll go, oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. And the reason I asked you is because I knew that you wouldn't answer that, because you've already established that your big picture is you're not trying to disprove the existence of the individual gods, if that makes sense to those watching.
Yeah, you're right, Pete. Sorry, I wasn't trying to mess around. I just didn't get where you were going.
No. And I think because you have a slightly different view of that. Peter Veitch, can I bring you in there? Did you notice that in your reading of Grenville's book, like that he's not really trying to discredit any god, although he's laying a defense
really.
for the god he does believe in?
Had the blinkers of, this is what Adventists think, therefore Grenville does, and obviously
Some
as
sort of
someone who's
bias.
read more, I would suggest I'm getting the impression is am I allowed to use the word progressive Adventist rather than the fundamentalist version? So I would sort of have those blinkers of, these are the Seventh-day Adventist beliefs, therefore Grenville, rather than letting Grenville speak for himself.
I doubt very much that the Adventist Church would agree with that premise that Grenville is putting forward. I'm not, but I think it's a really interesting.
No, I think I could loosely agree with Grenville on the points there.
I guess I see it like this. There is a God, right? If you want to call it Vishnu or Ganesh. Ganesha is my favorite Hindu god, just because he's got a sense of humor. If you want to call it that, well, you've got some of the basic idea of God. You've missed some other bits, but you've got some of the basic points. And I want to emphasize the common ground. I want to say, I'll share a taxi ride with you as far as you want to go. There might come a point where we're going different directions, and that's okay, but let's at least share a taxi ride as far as we can. Let's emphasize the common points, and let's say, yeah, we both believe there's a supernatural. We both believe we didn't get here by chance. Therefore, there's probably some meaning in life. Therefore, there's probably an afterlife. Therefore, there's probably some objective morality. Great. There's a great start. There's a lot of common ground, which I don't have with many atheists, because while many atheists are good and moral people, they can't base their morality on a belief. They can't get objective. Actually, that's not fair. People like Sam Harris try to get objective morality, but I don't think logically that succeeds. And they don't believe in afterlife, whereas me and the Vishnu worshipper do. And so there's a lot more in common with that. And I don't want to go bagging those people. It's bad marketing apart from bad theology. I just want to say, great, we agree this far up the mountain. Let's discuss how much further up the path goes.
Have you had pushback from Adventists? Because
No.
what Adventists want to hear is, yeah, all other gods are wrong. This Adventist God, or the God of the West, is right. Champion that for us, Grenville. But I just noticed a little broader way of thinking in there, which I wonder if they picked up on.
You know, the funny thing, Pete, that's maybe the image of some fundamentalist Adventists, that cultural myopia and that sort of elitism and arrogance. But even if you read the most scary parts of the book of Revelation, you know, the Babylon is false religion. Okay. But even in there, God says to people in Babylon, come out of her, my people. In other words, you know, even that Revelation God is going, even within some religions that Christians would call false religions, there are God's people. There are people who are looking for love and truth and light and hope. And they're my people too. You know, I think if Adventism reads its prophecies right, it's not going to make that mistake of being arrogant and elitist. And it's going to use it's going to love people as Christ did. And you know how he said, I've got other sheep that are not in this fold yet, but I'm going to call them, and then soon there'll be one fold and one shepherd. I reckon that's what God's doing. I reckon he's revealing love and truth to everybody, irrespective of their brand name, politics, religion, whatever, culture, and calling them all to himself. And that's got to build unity, hasn't it?
One would hope, but Adventists claim a special, unique message that for these last days that kind of cultivates an us and them standard.
It has done in the 50s, hasn't it? And back in the 20s as well. But I think we're getting past that. I think. I don't know.
What about the banning of the reclaiming the prophet book in the last few weeks? That's
I'm not here to defend the Adventist.
That's 1950s. Yeah, and that the conversation today is not that, but yeah. I mean, if you're using a broader scope that you hope that all movements and denominations are hearing the call of God to become one shepherd, one flock. Adventists, just as an aside, tend to cultivate a narrative that doesn't support that.
Look, even if we've proved one particular denomination to be completely myopic, it doesn't affect the existence of God.
I still think what I'm saying. That's more of an aside than the topic of today. Let's go to chapter 9. So give me a summary of this question. So what if you believe in God? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I've sort of tried to get a grid together, right, and say, what are the things that you believe? Let me quickly whip you through it if you're interested. And you can... I've divided into 3 things. Questions about us, questions about the universe, and questions about ideas. Okay, and I'm only comparing 2 religions, right? Christian theism, or probably theism generally, but not always, and also atheism, materialism. And you go through and you go, okay, where did we get consciousness? Well, a lot of atheists will say we don't actually have it. We haven't had that chat, but a lot of atheists will actually say we don't have consciousness. The best atheist philosophers. Whereas Christian theism is going to say we got our consciousness and reason from the great mind behind the universe, and is just as real as matter. Mind is foundational to the universe. There was mind before there was. Okay. Where do we get our personhood? Well, atheism is going to say we don't actually have it, or somehow it arose from impersonal physical processes. Christian theism is going to say we're personalities because God has a personality. Where do we get free will? Many atheists, including Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, some of the big names that I've interviewed, they'll say we don't have free choice. We just don't have it. We think we do, but we don't. Whereas Christian theism will say God has given us minds that can think freely. And you think about it, freedom, man, cry freedom. That's one of the greatest wishes of every human being under oppressive regimes. What do they want? Freedom. And atheism is saying, and I can quote you dozens of these things, saying that we don't actually have it. Where does our desire for purpose and meaning come from? Well, atheism says it comes from purposeless, meaningless physical processes. Whereas theism says it comes from God's loving intentions for us to have rich, interesting lives with purpose and meaning in them. And that the thing that's really going to give you meaning is love and giving to others. That's what's going to really float your boat. Where did talent and giftedness come from? Well, a lucky spin of the genetic wheel, or a gift from God to use to make life good for others. Why do we suffer? Atheism says bad luck, the universe doesn't care, and then you die. Christian theism says we suffer because of misuse of human free will. God cares about it, knows about it, and will one day repair absolutely everything, including wiping away all tears. Not wiping away memory and erasing brains, that's a denial of freedom, but wiping away all the painful things of memory. Like when I dated the prettiest girl in year 3, Louise, if you're listening, hello, and she dumped me, I was heartbroken. But I'm not heartbroken now. I look back on that memory and I just go, yeah, that was a fun kid thing. If I bumped into her in the street, I'd give her a hug and say good day and have a chat. And I think that's what we'll be like in the afterlife. That's what Christianity teaches. Peter made the point before that people who've been damaged will still be damaged. I actually think they'll be healed. I actually think the pain will fade and we'll still have the memories and the wisdom, but we won't be suffering it. But just 2 more quick ones. What is our future? Atheism says unpredictable randomness, then death, and that's it. And eventually the solar system ends with a bang, but no one cares because there's no one out there. Theism says unpredictable stuff and death happens in the short term in this life, but in the long term, there's eternal bliss with great people, with adventure, with tourism, with travel, with big projects, with the deepest relationships we've ever had, with creativity, with physical pleasures, and above all, knowing the most lovable and entertaining person in the universe, God. And so what can we wish each other as a final question? Well, atheism, we can really just say good luck. But with Christian theism, we can go, I wish you God's blessings. I wish you that future. And like, I wish that for everybody. That's why I'm writing the book. You know, Pete said before, I wrote it down, he said, I wish it was true. I wish it was true. And I wish it was true, Peter, as well. But if it's not true, then I don't want to bother with it because it's a bunch of nonsense. I don't believe in Santa Claus. But if it is true, man, there's some beautiful implications, I think, that flow from it. There's other stuff there, but that's probably one summary.
No, that's a good summary. And Peter, a lot there for you to comment on.
There's just so much going on. Pascal Wages buried in there somewhere. But I'd also have the the not caring doesn't follow. While I would agree that ultimately, I suspect that the universe will just heat death of the universe, or depending what the models are, whether it might not be that. I think ultimately, the sun will turn into a red giant. All life on Earth will be fried before it explodes, if it does explode. Ultimately, I think that's right, that there is nothing there, but I don't think that's a reason to say don't care. I think that's a reason to care even more. If your next heartbeat could be your last, if that person down the street where you're driving your car, actually try extra hard to not hurt them, because there's no get out of jail free card by going up to some imaginary nirvana or something. So I think the care while we were here really is even more important, or at least equally as important as the theists might say. And sure, I'll go along for the birds, enjoy their day in the sun, and then the sparrow falls and that's it. I think that's the case. But let's be kind in the meantime. And basically Marcus Aurelius, if there be gods, then yay. But if not, still care and do the right thing towards others. I don't think it follows it. Therefore, you shouldn't care.
Peter, just an interesting. I'm interested in your thoughts. I forgot this last time, Grenville, in our chat. The lady from Sudan, Ayan
Ali Hirsi.
Yes. What were your thoughts when she kind of went from being the fifth horse person of the apocalypse to a believer? Is her belief more like a Jordan Peterson style move to believing that the West or humans need some kind of construct, and the Christian construct is a good one to use? A cultural Christian? Is she a cultural Christian? What are your thoughts?
Oddly horrified. So two things in there. The cultural Christian, if you've got the love your neighbor, I'm fine. I just don't think you need to love an imaginary being to do that. I think that might give some slight credence to the people believing things for emotional, psychological, and cultural reasons, that if she was being threatened with death for her beliefs coming from her background, I can understand that people might want to either for real or pretend that they have gone back to whichever religion or faith or something. I was horrified. I thought when she did that, look, if she has a belief that maybe there's a God, I have that belief that maybe there's a God. The Christian religions, there's thousands of them. If you can pick the best things from any of them, okay, but I just don't think you need an imaginary God for that to happen. Yeah, actually, I was a bit horrified when she recanted.
There was an interesting interview with her and Dawkins about it, and he seemed horrified as well. He possibly did agree, though, that the West is under attack by the very people that have threatened her life many times, and that maybe it's the Christian collective that is going to be most able to resist that onslaught. therefore, does it warrant becoming a cultural Christian to support that?
Yeah, now that's interesting. There's perhaps some merit in that. I mean, I don't know if you have to have an invisible police in the sky to make you behave. Is it better to sort of imagine that it's real and then, that God's going to get you, or this set of beliefs are going to make you have a better society?
I wonder if...
Yes, sure.
I wonder if evolutionarily speaking, humans are wired to gather around ideas. That's what gathers them together, regardless if the idea is right or wrong.
I like that.
Makes them
I
effective.
think that ideas are the things that
galvanize.
It's a little bit different. That lead to success. I think thinking and the brain is humans equivalent to the claws from the lions and tigers. The people can walk along and see the footprints next to the water hole and then say, connect the dots. Maybe we come back here at sunset the next day and capture the gazelle and there's lunch. So by having ideas, I think, that was one of the things that makes us a little separate from the non-human animals. Not sure.
Do you therefore disagree with Jordan Peterson's stance, which to me clearly is a God and a Western belief in God that he supports as a story, not as a personal faith belief?
Oh, look, yeah.
A lot of Christians have gone, oh, good, Jordan Peterson's on board.
Okay, as a story, but if people sort of improve on the story and use it as a basis, like, for example, the Golden Rule, which was said way before Jesus' time and after, and I think his version of it isn't the best one. But if you're going to expand it and iterate it out to make it better, then I think, if you're going to use that as a basis, I'd actually welcome that. I just iterate the Golden Rule of do things to others that you'd want. I'd not arrogate my view onto other people. I'd say do things and don't do things to them that they want, and then include safety things like no harm principle. If they want to be hurt, don't hurt them. And also, informed consent as well. So, you could say yay, but it sounds like a little bit fluffy aphorism.
Well, the only thing, though, is that you and I can agree with that moral stance and let's agree on this and this and this. But what if other people in community don't? So I guess what Jordan Peterson is saying, what Ayaan Hirsi is saying, is that here's a template already existing that has worked through thousands of years, generations,
sure,
and eventually developed a consensus that isn't appealing to everybody, but there's enough that agree. Where a lot of atheists at the moment, like the whole new atheist movement, has kind of imploded on itself because one side doesn't believe in the woke culture and the other side does. And I mean, even Matt Dillahunty, has had massive fights with other atheists. So what I'm saying is that just maybe Ayaan, and maybe Richard Dawkins caught a glimmer of it, and I think Jordan Peterson has thought a lot about it. Maybe this template at least provides a scatterbomb kind of belief system that, generally speaking, keeps society together, keeps it safe, keeps people making babies. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd agree that it actually is a template, whether you want to agree with it or not. I think it becomes a default template.
Right.
That it's sort of,
it's there anyway because humans have
I think it's
drives.
The only counted that would be maybe some Chinese Confucianism or Taoism or Japanese ones would have a system of looking after other people in the culture. So you could say maybe use those as a template as well, rather than necessarily a Christian one.
Well, it's interesting that the Taoist teaching, which actually came up with the Golden Rule, but had it the other way around, don't do to others what you wouldn't want them to do to you, which is, it helps to make you more relaxed in life instead of a people pleaser and we're going to do this and do that and how many articles of clothing giving out, that kind of thing. But the Lao Tzu, who may have been a conglomerate figure pieced together by monks over 400 years. Either way, that it wasn't a belief structure that had a supernatural component, and neither was Buddhism. It's interesting that humans at some point want to take this natural desire to have good ideas, learn from each other, pass those teachings on, want to add a supernatural component to it. Taoism, Buddhism, they all now have massive supernatural templates laid down upon them. And I'll bring your thoughts in on that too, Grenville, in a moment. But just what are your thoughts on that, Peter? It seems to be something within the human species, Homo sapiens, mammals, primates, want to start with a sense of, okay, we've got this agreed collective of teachings, and moral teachings, like,
I think that's a function
we're
of
going to
social
add
groups, of social animals, is to look after the group. So I think that comes built in, despite all the flaws of it.
Why do Homo sapiens add that extra? Like, there's no other animal or being life form that adds the supernatural, and humans love doing it.
Sure, I think that the type 1, type 2 eras of us ascribing agency to something, where you hear the rustle in the grass, oh, that was the wind, or it was the lion. Well, if you assume it's agency, it's the lion, you actually get to live more than the person who thought it was just the wind. So I think part of that is ascribing agency is a natural tendency for humans, and is something that generally helps us, live, survive, breed, etc. But I think there's also another thing where I think most animals tend to live in the moment, whereas humans can remember our past, see back, and even envisage a time before we were alive and envisage a time after it. So in a sense, by being able to foresee our death is actually something most animals probably don't have. That's quite painful. If you can see an impending demise, maybe come up with coping mechanisms to do that. And there are some arguments that that's one of the functions of religions. So ascribing agency in the short, immediate term, but also looking forward into the long term of we can imagine a future one way or another, or another.
Yeah, well, thanks for those thoughts. And that's very interesting. And Grenville might have something to say that Homo sapiens, humans, have that ability because there's a God, that it confirms a God. I'll be interested in what you say there, Grenville.
It's funny you say that, Pete. Why do we ability to detect puzzle about religion and wonder about afterlife? It's not a survival advantage.
Well, it is if you look at the peacock. Look at the example of the peacock feathers. They get bigger and bigger and fancier, which isn't a great survival technique. But at a certain point, the creative person, the person that writes poetry, books, songs, it gives them a greater advantage to have more children. So there is definitely an evolutionary advantage to that.
That's the traditional
textbook. We've been going forever. We're going to wrap this up.
All our audios are cancelling out.
Are we going to wrap this up sometime? This is 2 hours. We could talk forever, aren't we?
Well, our shows are normally 2.5 hours, so we're coming up to the finish. So
just to have a crack at there, Pete. I think cluster. If you have a big tail, you'll pull more chicks. If you're musical, you'll pull more chicks. That's why it's a survival advantage. But that only thinks one step ahead. You've then got to think, well, okay, you impress a chick and you breed, and I mean chicken if you're talking about peacocks, but then are your offspring more survivable? If they've got this big stupid tail, it might actually be a disadvantage. Textbook old evolutionary doesn't hold. You've really got to ask.
They will have. Sorry, there's an audio delay now. They will if they have the big feathers. And it's a disadvantage eventually. By then they will have produced children that have a good chance of having big feathers too, and they will have a more chance of producing more children before they die. So I'm just saying there is credible, valid ways to support those.
What I'm saying is that's only one. Reproductive advantage is only one. You've then got to go into the environment and survive. And if you've got this big stupid tail, you'll only survive in environments in the world. You won't. Peacocks haven't spread around the world like much more birds, things like that. Peacocks can be rich environment, and that's the disadvantage of the tail that nobody. We're talking philosophy of science here, okay? We're talking. Yeah, but the point is, if the survival of a peacock versus that of a sparrow is much weaker, and yes, you'll impress the chicks, but you won't actually survive much in much of the real world. And that's my argument with the brain as well. We have this incredibly big brain, wacko, but it also means we have a much longer gestation period, much more difficult births, a much longer infancy, and we will, as a species, 10, 12, 15, whereas dumber species can drop out of their mum and go running off and live in the world, no problem. And I've heard those old sayings too, but when you really question philosophy of science and go, hang on a minute, I don't think it really holds up. And so the human brain, the fact that it's so sophisticated, yes, it gives us a survival advantage today, but did it back on the savannas of Africa? No, it could actually be just as much of a disadvantage. And that's called the evolutionary argument against naturalism. I mentioned that one in the book as well. I think it's pretty convincing when you look at it. If you're prepared to go, yes, I know what I heard in high school science class, but let's take it one step further and think if it really works. Then I think you find it doesn't.
Well, I think all that suggests is that nature is trying to find the optimal setting in the environment, the optimal, in our case, human adaptation, so that we can provide the optimal amount of kids in that place, in that generation, in that time, not to compare with other species.
Sorry to butt in. Did you just attribute agency to nature, Pete, when you said nature is trying to do something, to achieve something? Because if you did, I'm right with you.
It's trying without thinking, is what I'm suggesting, and that's why if it was a thought out process, species wouldn't die out. I mean, humans could well eventually get to the point where or let's use the peacocks with the big feathers. If all of them started doing that, and some kind of growth started happening where even younger they became the big feathers and therefore couldn't survive, eventually that species would die, and that's what happens. So it's not indicating a intelligent design, it's indicating a process by which the thinking and agency is happening with a non-game theory, zero-sum game theory, where here's your options, you move forward or you don't, left or right or you don't. And so there's mechanisms in play that with adaptation that neither of us would disagree. You just look at the Galapagos studies that adaptation doesn't occur, and why the environment and natural selection gifts certain types of traits that an animal might have and not others. So the ones that don't have the traits needed die out, and the ones that do survive. So it's not indicating intelligence. It's literally just going, well, if you're born with a longer beak and you can get the berries further down in the gaps of the rocks, you're more likely to survive. So you survive, and then you have other offspring that are more likely to have longer beaks, so they're more likely to survive. And gradually the ones with the shorter beaks don't survive. It's witnessed, right in front of us. It's not a woo-woo.
No question. And think how simple beak length is. You've already got the structure there. You just have to lengthen it a bit. Compare that to a major upgrade to your brain, where each of those 100 billion of them, and you have a billion connections between them, and they work together. And each one of them is way more complicated than a Porsche factory. The odds of that happening completely by chance are insulting. And I've got a million atheists, well, not three actually really big ones I quote in the book, that say the same thing. And so I would say, if we're talking about the human brain and human giftedness, the human is the most complicated piece of matter in the universe. And to suggest that something of that much genius and ingenuity came by completely random processes. Unless you are saying that nature intends things. If you're saying nature intends things, great, I'm with you. If you're saying it happens by chance, I just go, the odds of that, even if you go back 13.8 billion years to the Big Bang, you haven't got enough time for 1% of 1% of that to happen.
Well,
So
if you
that's
looked at an amoeba, if you looked at the origin of the eye, for example, and you just simply looked at an amoeba that had a light sensitivity part of it, and it was just either light, and then when it was dark, it was dark, light, dark. One of the amoeba just comes along at random and notices some shades of light and dark. It's just an anomaly that's happened because there's millions of amoeba being produced, and that one suddenly has more advantages. So as it splits and divides, its offspring have the broader ability. So you just keep doing that over a few million years, and you can see it's going to go somewhere.
No question. I
That
understand basic evolutionary theory.
first cell,
I'm just saying
first
it doesn't
neuron,
work
you can just
probabilistically.
add
Hang
some
on,
more.
Pete. We've all just got to stop talking for a second. Who wants to go? Peter?
Go, Pete.
Grenville?
Go.
Once you've got some more, once you've got your cells and neurons, and I would agree with the difficulty of the abiogenesis, etc. But once you have enough neurons together to have some basic reactions, it's not really that difficult to get more and more and more and more. And once you have more, then you get an exponential increase in intelligence. So you're going to say, oh, you've got your rat brain. Okay, well, just add on some more cells and you have a bigger brain. And once you get a bigger brain, you can do more with it. It's perfectly reasonable and logical. I think the hard part would be the first cells. Once you've got your first neuron, all you have to do is split and you're doubling your processor power. It's sort of, what's the name of Moore's law for, for neurons. I don't think that's particularly difficult. You got your cat brain? Okay, double it. Double it, and you got human brain.
It sounds simple until you look at the detail. I'd just say to someone who's interested in really knowing the difficulties here, look at James Tour. Look, there's about 12 hours of lectures by James Tour on this, which is it's pretty complex. I'd just say have a look at the James Tour lecture series. If you really want to know.
Thumbs down.
That's a very interesting 2-word rebuttal of a 12-hour lecture series. If you look at the formation of the first cell, the complexity of one cell, the complexity of one ribosome, the complexity of the DNA within the nucleus, that your DNA has 3.5 billion chemical spelling letters in it. The chance of it assembling by chance, and that's what you're talking about, no intelligence.
No, nobody.
You don't have enough.
You keep saying chance.
Can I just finish that thought? You don't have enough time in the 13.8 billion, if that's what you're saying, for that to happen by chance. And you don't have any other mechanism other than chance. Do you? What's your other mechanism? Intelligence somewhere? Because let's hear it.
No, there's at least 44 different mechanisms involved in evolution. Chance is one of them, merely only one of them. And I'll put it up on my blog or on Facebook or something. Actually, I've already got it in SDA Fight Club, 44 different mechanisms for evolution. Nobody's saying just chance. It's way, way, way more than chance. Once you have a few, if you want your 3 billion things in your DNA, well, look, just start with 10. All you have to do is double it. You keep doubling it, and hypothetically, mathematically, doubling something every 20 minutes, you would complete your 3 billion in, I don't know, less than a day or something. It doesn't follow that you have to build the whole lot by chance. Nobody's saying by chance. I'll give you 44. I'll give you 43 other things than chance, and I'll put it on SDA Fight Club or on my blog or something. That's a mistake.
It's all chance.
It is not all.
Every mechanism is chance.
No,
well, if you
not
go right back.
No. Look, stop.
Go right back to the beginning of the universe.
Oxygen and hydrogen are not by chance will come together. Yes, I'll give you that. But when you have your oxygen and hydrogen together, by the physical laws, they must be attracted. That's not chance. It might be chance at where the atoms are, but it is more than chance. Chance, yes.
I agree with you. It's much more than chance. Where did those laws come from? Where did those laws come from?
All right, let's go for how do stars form? Gravity attracts hydrogen until sufficient mass generates heat and pressure to ignite fusion. We have plenty of reason to say this is how stars are made. We can see it happening. You don't point to which part where you think God did it. If you want to say it made the laws 13 billion years ago, fine, I'll give you that as a hypothetical possibility. But now stars make themselves. We can see it happening, not by chance is part of it, but gravity, squeeze them down, the atoms sort of then fuse, then you've got a star. And the same for your moon. You mentioned the moon in your book somewhere. The planets, moons, stars, gravity, get the elements together, get your fusion, off you go, or fission, depending on the stars.
If you think it's simple, you haven't studied it.
If you think it's simple,
you don't get it. If you think it's easy, double it, you just double it, away we go. There's no question. The person who, launched the theory of stellar nuclear genesis, how do chemicals click together? Sorry, can I just finish that thought? Together, in fact, the entire periodic table, when you look at it, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's Lego blocks clicking together into a system. Even that implies intelligence. The guy who invented that, Medvedev, he basically said, why is chemistry so ordered and so organized? Oh, I know, because he's a believer. He thinks that there was a mind behind it. And so even the chemicals you're talking about show genius behind them. Otherwise, they would be random. You got two options. Either there's a random Big Bang that just spews particles out at random, or you've got laws and design. You can't have either chance or it's intelligence. And you keep talking about intention or intelligence, and I'm going, yeah, I agree with you. But you just put your foot across the line into
No, I would agree with the laws in terms of descriptive laws, that hydrogen by physics laws are descriptive rather than prescriptive. When the hydrogen gets together, it turns into helium, turns into carbon, then oxygen, and all these other things. These laws, yes, but I would call them descriptive laws, that they are then creating more complex molecules. We can see them out in space, even organic molecules. I see zero part there that requires ta-da magic.
Now I'm just going to jump in because we're going to wrap it up with I think an important point that Grenville summarizes with his book. I will just say there though, Grenville, what if the being that is designing all this doesn't necessarily have good intentions?
Then we're stuffed.
And maybe it's an AI being, or maybe we are all part of an AI generated universe. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to support that as well. Yeah. So, but I don't think Peter's saying it's simple. I think he's just saying there are processes at play that might explain it as equally provably as there's a God behind it as well.
And yet, even process suggests intention and design. A process doesn't. It's an extreme process. It doesn't appear by. Even that would suggest that there's a mind behind it.
Snowflakes. Snowflakes look designed, but they're not designed. They can be explained by, the dipoles in the water molecule and freezing, etc. It doesn't imply there's a designer. The hexagonal shape of snowflakes and being different doesn't require a design. Maybe there is designing every little snowflake, but I think that is ridiculous.
So do I. But I don't think it's ridiculous that snowflakes follow the laws of physics, and the laws of physics are orderly. They're not just descriptive, describing what happens. They control things. Things obey them, and they have they exercise in the natural world.
Yes.
And it's like,
Yes.
you've got to come up with the cause came from. Otherwise, you'd have randomness. You'd have complete and total randomness, just spewing molecules out of the Big Bang, nothing organized. And yet we have organization in the cell, in cells before that, etc., etc. It's really clear.
Yeah, chemical attractions. It doesn't necessarily imply a designer. You start with hydrogen, then you get more and more complex elements, then you get molecules, and then molecules together can do other things. Everything in the human body, it's all molecules. Everything. All that thinking is product of electricity, of ion gradients, of chemicals moving in and out. Every single part is a chemical and a molecule.
All of which are governed by laws, aren't they, of chemistry and laws of physics?
Yes.
And without
It
that,
just
we're in
doesn't necessarily follow that therefore a God did it. Maybe, but not necessarily.
But more likely, I would argue. The probability, I think, argues for it.
In many ways, you're both. We can say we're both on the same page with that. That you're saying more likely, but not 100%, Grenville, and Peter's saying less likely, but I'm open to a small chance of it being true. It's just that.
Yeah, well, Peter sounds like an open atheist. He's an open atheist, not a closed one.
Well, most atheists are. Most atheists are like that. They just choose to live that way or not.
I'd say stay open. Know what more there is out there.
Well, even Dawkins will say, "Look,
people voted for Dawkins, the old straight white Anglican male."
This is the collapse of the new atheist world. The Matt Dillahunty versus Richard Dawkins. It was sad to see because it imploded.
Turned into that old white straight male.
My point was, he also says that you don't know for sure.
6.9 on the Dawkins scale.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
I interviewed Dan Barker once, and he said yes, and he said it's just probabilities. He says it's not very plausible, whereas you're saying Grenville's saying it's very plausible, and an atheist says it's not plausible. Go for it, Peter.
Just wondering about. I'm not able to access the comments and things. I haven't opened that other window. I didn't want feedback. Is there anything interesting on the comment section?
There are some interesting things. We'll come to them in the 5 minutes after we close, which is right now, with one last question. And I wanted to do this one because for me, my keeping of the identity with the culture I was raised in, I found comfort and practical benefits from Jesus' teachings. Very simple. And I found rest and respite and not having to think too much, though I do love these conversations and I do love thinking outside the box. And I've had some interesting conversations with both of you in relaxed settings. But this question, it comes from your chapter 12 of the book, Grenville. Hold it up one more time. We'll get one more chance to give it a plug. This book by Grenville Kent is available online right now. It's selling well. I think it was even number one for a while. Might still be in its category, in its genre. And
I haven't looked for a while, but it was, yeah.
Congratulations. Thanks, it might still be. But in chapter 12, got the whippersnapper going outside. In chapter 12, you claim there are 4 facts about Jesus that almost every scholar or expert does agree with, whether they are Christian, Jewish, agnostic. What are these facts, and what's the evidence?
Well, number one, and this is going to take more than 5 minutes to do properly, but I can briefly summarize. Number one, Jesus was a real person of history, and he died by crucifixion. I had to laugh the other day, Pete. You posted something, or Peter rather, you posted on your Facebook a thing about why resurrection's a myth. It was a few weeks back now, and I remember I was just chuckling because the first thing you said was there's no Roman evidence for the existence of Jesus. I can quote you 3 of the best Roman historians who actually attest to the fact that he lived and that he died by crucifixion.
Stop. You're conflating 2 things. This is the Santa Claus thing. Yes, there might have been a Saint Nicholas, but that doesn't mean Santa Claus is real. Sure, I agree that Jesus probably existed, but then to go on for the leap for the resurrection is a completely other thing.
Well, I'm not talking about resurrection at the moment. Number 1, he was a real person of history, and he died by crucifixion. You've got the best Roman historian, Tacitus, and others saying that. Number 2, his tomb was found to be empty on Sunday morning. Okay, now that doesn't. Yeah, well, this is attested by.
Story says.
Huh?
This is the story that is saying that. That's not evidence. Where's your eyewitnesses? There's not a single first-person eyewitness. You're talking about stories written by the Gospels by people who have written like decades and decades later. Not a single one of them is an eyewitness, which eyewitness can get things wrong.
And it's like one person. It wasn't 500.
Support your story.
It wasn't 500 separate people. It wasn't 500 separate people that confirmed seeing Jesus after he died. It was one person saying 500 people did.
Sure.
The
But tell me
500 is interesting.
Tell me you're joking about no eyewitnesses, right? You're joking.
Something.
Tell me that you're joking about no eyewitnesses. You've heard of John, right? You've heard of the Apostle John, who wrote the Gospel of John.
Who wrote John and when? No, the most scholars don't buy John as being a first-person eyewitness. That's not the scholarly consensus
nonsense.
at all.
Most scholars absolutely do buy John. Where's your evidence
Not
of
as a
that?
first-person eyewitness. That is not even close to the truth. Luke himself says that he wasn't an eyewitness. You're using a story to support your story.
No,
Mark
I'm using
was
eyewitness
internally
testimony.
anonymous. Matthew, I think, was internally anonymous. John, almost certainly not John Apostle, written decades and decades later.
No,
That one I would say close to it would be Paul, but all the others, written actually arguably after Paul, by the way.
Let's not mix up 2 issues.
You're making up eyewitnesses. Firstly, they get it wrong. You're making up the people who were saying it. Not true.
Can I respond now? Can I respond? Okay. John was an eyewitness. He says he was an eyewitness. You're mixing up 2 things there. The distance between seeing and writing is one question. The eyewitness is another. John was definitely an eyewitness. He writes a few decades later because he's so busy going around teaching it, the same story to Christians and to the whole world or parts of it, that only when he starts to think he's about to die does he write it down. But that's no problem. If you compare the time between seeing something and writing something, he doesn't completely change his story. So I'm sorry, but no eyewitnesses thing just falls in the bin. John, Luke, you're right, was a compiler of other people's eyewitnesses stories, and that's also an equally valid historic way to proceed.
Stories, not an eyewitness. What about Mark and Matthew? Internally anonymous, and your John, there are very good reasons to think that he wasn't an eyewitness.
Like what? Like what?
I'd have to go in and look it up, but the scholars have written, if you go and look on where and when John was written, it is most likely not an eyewitness. Possible, yes, I'll give you that. Probable, unlikely, and
name me one scholar that says that. Name me one scholar that you've read that says that. Because to be honest, that's nonsense what you're saying. Not to criticize you.
No, it's not. No.
Name me one scholar. You say lots of scholars say it.
Tabor would agree with Peter Veitch,
because I don't have that on the top of my head. But yeah, you've already admitted that Luke wasn't, so yay for that. What? And
read the book itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the claim. Right. The book is saying that John said it. That's not evidence that actually was a John saying. So this eyewitness stuff.
James Tabor has a lot to agree with what Peter Veitch is saying, and Bart Ehrman. There's lots of scholars that would agree with Peter Veitch.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, actually, Bart Ehrman doesn't say that.
I'd have to look it up.
Bart Ehrman says things like, "Look, I'm not sure. I go ahead that Jesus did." People are saying John was the actual John that Jesus spoke of, or was it someone else? Those gospels that were going around were largely handed around anonymously, and names were attributed later. John came many years after, like that writing came many years after Christ's death. Paul's writings were what, 20, 30 years after.
There's
But
no
I don't think
on
Peter Veitch is saying there's no. Peter's not saying he doesn't believe Jesus existed or not. I think he's saying, yep, probably most likely. And these claims for resurrection he's doubting. There are scholars that doubt the resurrection, and there's many that don't.
We haven't even got to resurrection yet, actually, guys. You'll notice. I mean, so you asked for the 4 facts. Number one.
Back to the 4 facts. Back to the 4 facts.
Number one, Jesus was a real person of history, and he died by crucifixion. Tick. Number 2, his tomb was found to be empty on Sunday morning.
Stories.
Everything's a story. Everything we've got from history is a story. Number 3,
true.
Many people reported seeing him after his death, including some who previously doubted. And Ehrman will grant you that. Ehrman will say that. He'll explain it differently from how I will. He'll say they were imaginary visions.
He'll say claims were made, but he doesn't necessarily believe the claims.
An experience of like, Paul had an experience. I would argue that he had maybe epilepsy or hallucination or ate some bad mushrooms. He had an experience which he interpreted as speaking to Jesus. And in a sense, that would be a version of resurrection, I suppose.
Epilepsy, what a classic for such a... You read his writings, the guy's an absolute genius. Anyway, number 4, after being initially fearful, multiple eyewitnesses spoke publicly and wrote about his resurrection, even when they faced prison, torture, and execution for it. Okay? That's a fact.
No, that's the story. Multiple eyewitnesses who wrote a first-person eyewitness account. Paul would be, in my opinion, as per Bart Ehrman and others, most likely a real person who had actually met people. I'll give you that. But to say that others are first-person eyewitnesses seeing a resurrection, no, don't think so. No,
James, his brother.
Unlikely.
James, his brother, and John. So you've got Paul, James, John. Definitely.
And they wrote.
Sorry? James wrote the book of James.
No,
he didn't. James didn't write the book of James. Okay. You'd have to find me scholarly evidence on that.
I don't know, but I'm not saying there is solid evidence of first-person eyewitnesses.
There's 3 at least.
I think that's a stretch.
Okay, well, have a look at the evidence for it, and you'll understand that James has actually got really solid credentials. James is also mentioned in one of the other accounts. He's mentioned in the Jewish history of this. If you go to Italy, they've got a really ancient copy of that sitting there in one of the libraries that I went to, and that's in the Talmud. And you've got sorry.
I was going to say, I'm not aware that James confirms the resurrection of Jesus in the book of James.
Oh, for sure. James is a follower in the church.
Whereabouts in James?
Well, he's a leader in the church in Jerusalem. He's mentioned in the book of Acts as a leader in the church of Jerusalem. Check it out.
I know that James he's the guy that took over from Jesus. And I'm saying that he wrote the book of James. I'm just saying that in the book of James, I don't think it explicitly mentions Jesus' resurrection.
No, sure. But he's the guy he actually gets killed for his belief. He gets shot for it. And in 1 Corinthians 5, Paul...
But I think what Peter's saying is, where are the witnesses confirming the resurrection? That's what he's doubting. He's not doubting that James existed, that he wrote James, that he says James lived, that Jesus lived and died. But of these 3 witnesses that you were mentioning, are you saying they are witnesses for the resurrection? Or did I mishear that?
He's a leader in the Christian church. What do you reckon he's teaching?
Well, but you'd think that in the book of James, he would therefore teach the resurrection, but he doesn't. There's no explicit mention of Jesus' resurrection in the book of James.
That he's tackling other topics. It's not the only topic he talks about, but there's no question. If he's one of the early Christian martyrs, he's not doing it because he doesn't believe in resurrection.
You'd think if it was your key, if that's the key thing, the resurrection, you'd think you'd mention it in your main book to the followers.
Well, that's an argument from silence, but I know that in Galatians, Paul goes to James.
No, it's not an argument for silence. It's an argument for an absence of content that you're claiming is important content. And James,
Do you like the
who is
Beatles?
the next leader, sorry.
Do you like the Beatles?
Oh, of course.
You haven't mentioned them in this conversation once, Pete. I'm not sure that you like them. You know where I'm going with that, right?
But if the title of my theme was, if this discussion was about the Beatles, I would mention the Beatles. So what you're saying is that James was one of the witnesses to Jesus' resurrection. So if James is one of the three witnesses for the resurrection, but James himself doesn't mention it in his book, isn't that that's not evidence that James supports the resurrection theory?
Well, first of all, in Galatians, Paul goes to James to compare notes with him and say, tell me what you know about the resurrection. So Paul cites James as one of his major sources in finding out the truth and confirming what he knew about the resurrection. He's also mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15 as one of the key witnesses to the resurrection. He does talk about the gospel in his book. There's no question about that.
Talks about the gospel, but he doesn't talk about the resurrection. And many people claim that James' version of the gospel is different to Paul's, and that's why James said, Paul, you are not an apostle.
Sorry? James said Paul's not an apostle?
James didn't accept. Paul comes along to that very first kind of gathering, and they're all getting together, and I think it's talked about in the book of Acts. I'm not sure. Peter Veitch might be able to confirm it. But James, Paul's desperately wanting to have the apostles, yes, you are one of us, and they don't. And Paul says that they didn't. It's not a made up thing. It's very clear that Paul realizes he was rejected. He later on says, they came around eventually. But if the topic is resurrection, not gospel, not teachings of Jesus, and James is one of the three witnesses, I'm just identifying that he didn't stand as a representative witness for the resurrection.
Oh, well, he certainly does in two mentions in Paul. And the fact that he's a Christian leader in the early church, I don't think he's going to be that if he has doubts about the resurrection. It's sort of like, it just goes with the territory. Anyway.
There's a lot of evidence to suggest that there were two great movements after Christ died. There was the James movement and there was the Pauline kind of movement, and that they didn't always agree, or, and many suggest that the James movement actually didn't believe in the resurrection. A lot of James Tabor stuff is quite deeply involved with that.
Look,
I'm just talking to plausibility.
Yeah, you can quote liberal Christians, or they don't believe anything. They don't believe a lot of the stuff. There's no question about that. But if you look at the text itself, if you go on what these people actually said, you have James clearly believe his brother was the Christ. He says it in servant.
He believes Jesus was the Messiah.
Yeah, he believes the whole box and dice. You're not going to be a leader in the early church and die for it if you doubt the major teaching of Christianity. Anyway, those are the four.
It's Paul's major teaching, the resurrection. That's Paul's thing. It's not actually James's thing. If it was James's thing, he'd have talked about it. Paul talks about it incessantly. James doesn't. James doesn't talk about it.
Paul got it.
It's just an interesting.
Paul got it from James.
No, he didn't. What did Paul say? What did Paul say? What did he say about James telling me about the resurrection?
Read Galatians 1. He says that he goes off and confers with James and checks his facts with James. And he mentions James in 1 Corinthians 15 as well as one of the rock-solid eyewitnesses of people who were witnesses to Jesus' resurrection. James gets an absolute mention. So this whole thing of a tension between James and Paul is being cooked up by 20th century philosophers and theologians. It's not in the text.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those are the four.
It's very.
And
It's.
the
I
question
mean
is
that. I'm not being facetious. I'm very interested
No,
in
no,
this,
no.
and I'm at my next level of good. I'll now research what Paul was saying. James said.
Yeah. Check out 1 Corinthians 15 and Galatians 1. Twice Paul mentions James as a source on that stuff and as a witness. So there's no question James spoke about it. He talked about other things in his book. There's no question he's dealing with the implications of the gospel, trying to cement the historicism of it, because others have done that. He's doing a pastoral epistle saying, guys, if you follow Jesus, here's what you need to do. He's assuming that they already believe. You know what I mean? So, look, obviously people interpret those four things different ways. But number one, Jesus was a real person of history and died by crucifixion. That one's rock solid. Number two, the fact that his tomb was found empty, that creates a major drama for the Jewish leadership of the day, and it's a huge controversy. And the problem there is, I mean, you might know this, but there's a major problem with that story, and I'm interested no one's pointed it out, and that is it's given by women, and the women are the first major references to the witnesses to the resurrection of Jesus. And listen to what this Greek philosopher Celsus does to it 100 years later. He says, the chief witness is a hysterical female, half crazy from fear and grief, possibly one other of the same band of charlatans who dreamed it all up or saw what they wanted to see, or more likely simply wanted to astonish their friends in the tavern with a good tale. And so he socks it to Christianity for being based on the testimony of a woman, which at the time in both Roman and Jewish law, I've checked it, would not be taken seriously in court, because women were too emotional and too silly, like children, okay? And yet Jesus goes, well, I'm going to choose women as my prime witnesses to this. And I know, I can see what your brain's thinking, Pete. If that's true, why the heck are we still not ordaining? Absolutely right. I think he's doing a bit more than just randomly choosing women there. I think he's trying to
Oh,
send
yeah. He was way ahead of the GC.
The story says that, and you keep building things in the story to support the story.
Do you believe the story?
And you're right, Paul.
Do you believe the stories of Julius Caesar? Do you believe the stories of?
I don't believe anything magical. If there's something magic, I think it's unlikely. If Caesar may or may not have done a variety of things, I'm quite happy to buy that there is a failed apocalyptic feature who probably existed. I think that's way more likely than not. I just don't buy the magical elements.
Because the stories, like just for an example, I was in Ireland and my wife's family over there took me to this special Catholic site where there was quite a life-size figure of Mother Mary, and I think it was 10 years or 25 years earlier, a massive group of people had gathered, 300-400, and on a special day. And there's like groves all over the place over there. I don't know if you guys have both been there, but you'll be driving on the road and there's a nice little grove and a statue, and people leave flowers and whatnot there. And anyway, allegedly the blood started coming out of the eyes and the hands. And so that's a story. The fact that people gathered and that the statue was there, I agree with that. But the claims, and hundreds of people now claim, oh yeah, I was there and I saw the blood. So the claims that of the miraculous nature are like, would you agree that did occur or didn't occur? To me, it's doesn't make them more factual. Yes, the statue is there. I've been there. Yes, hundreds of people were there. Yes, some people claim to have seen it, but there was no photographic evidence. There's eyewitness evidence, but would you say that that's therefore evidence that Mother Mary exists in heaven and is sending messages to people on earth?
An interesting side issue. It doesn't affect my belief in God either way. I'm interested to study it as a phenomenon, but I'm agnostic on those things.
If you're interested in studying it, as a phenomenon, maybe you could be just as interested in studying Jesus' resurrection as a phenomenon that may or may not have happened, just like the bleeding eyes of Mary may or may not have happened, but it doesn't actually have to change your larger arcing view of God.
But I would argue that's a much bigger bicky, a much bigger bicky. I just had a quick peek in James because I'd forgotten. I knew there was a reference in there where he calls Jesus our glorious Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, it's in 2:1. I just checked it of James. In other words, just think of that, right? He's the brother of Jesus. Jesus died maybe 20, 30, 40 years before, and yet he still calls him our glorious Lord. You're not a glorious Lord if you're lying in a tomb somewhere. You're only a glorious Lord in James's theology if you've gone up and joined, sitting at the right hand of God the Father. And so I'd argue that's a pretty good subtle hint at what he believes where Jesus is at this time. No, he doesn't come out and say, Jesus resurrected and I saw it. But he does say, I'm a believer in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ. And I think he just takes it for granted. The job's been done. These people already believe. And so he's trying to just show the implications of that. That's my best current thought on James. I would definitely cite him as a reference. But even, you've got two others as well. You've got Paul, and you've got fairly solid evidence. In the next chapter, I look at what to do with those 4 facts, because you can interpret them different ways. Atheists can still take those 4 facts and explain them completely differently. But I argue, and we don't have time to do it now. I've actually got to go on a hot date, boys. I've got to run fairly soon. But
I have to go and pick up Renee.
Fair enough. But look, you can take those 4 claims and interpret them different ways. I fully grant that. But I think it's worth looking into them. Anyway, end of blow. I probably need to rock and roll.
Well, I think fascinating conversation, and we've started the dialogue, and you've both got me thinking and pondering, and I'm looking forward to digging even more deeply into these topics. I've really enjoyed reading your book, Grenville. Hold it up again. It's available on Amazon right now. You can buy the Kindle version. And hey, those that have watched, I really appreciate. So many of you have stuck with us this whole 2.5+ hours. And yeah, look, I think we're kind of heading to new waters. Peter, I love how you think and the questions you posit. And I really appreciate your involvement today. And I think, it's good when we've ever had little moments on the same page. That's good. But I do really value it very much. Thank you, Grenville Kent, Peter Veitch, and audience. Just a quick plug for tomorrow. We have Good News Fellowship on the Good News Fellowship channel. You need to be a subscriber over there to not to watch it, but to find it, I guess. And there we talk about those 4 Gospels, the teachings of Jesus, and we've only just scratched the surface. So we'll chat to you guys again, and look forward to seeing you in the near future. See you later.
Thanks, gents.